We're
Yes.
live. Are we live yet?
We are live.
Alrighty.
And
Someone who's gonna, like, subtly
what
put
started
something
me on it?
into their content. I mean, I think with Critical
Here's the
Drinker,
thing.
it's like pretty clear what his positions are on a lot of this stuff.
No, I understand it's clear what his positions are. Would you agree that in my original takedown, my original reaction, my original
Well, I wouldn't even call it a takedown. I mean,
thank you. Exactly. Would you
This
agree that I
wasn't
was
like a
being like
dismantling.
very, coming at it from
So,
good faith,
Vincent,
empathetic,
positive.
trying my best?
Could
Yeah,
please
I'm getting
answer.
the double feed anyways. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I watched your whole rough cut that you sent me.
And this is the rough cut because I was too lazy. So it's going to be the same thing.
Fine. Okay, then I watched this whole edit before we watched. I don't really know your perspective on this whole debacle, on the whole situation. So I'm curious,
trying
what
to be
is
a
that? And
good
what's
nuanced source. I try to steelman what is being said. We're getting Adam's perspective of that discussion right now. This
Wait,
is
which
the sort
Adam?
of the Adam with the U, YMS.
Oh, okay.
Let's just say YMS for the sake. Adam's going to be
Yep.
out of this for a
Adam will
moment.
be Adam
Brendan.
friended. Okay. I guess I would ask, what's the point of having this as your introduction? This clip.
This was my introduction to this because I sort of went back. I sort of ignored it at first. And sort of how YMS received the sort of encounters seems a little odd. And I think it's more of a factor of the audience. If you listen to him, it's more about the audience of EFAP. And why possibly the audience could have had this perception here. Because frankly, I like what Mauler is trying to do by staying non-political and non-partisan. But he does do some subtle leading, I believe, that can lead the audience in interesting directions. And sometimes the audience purposely...
Are you talking about Mauler or Adam right now? YMS.
Mauler. Yes.
Mauler is be politically sometimes?
He tries to stay non-political completely, but don't you know that Mauler tries to stay politics?
Yeah, I was. I thought you were just saying that you thought that he can kind of lead, like maybe do like a little subtle here or there without maybe
not
intentional
politically.
or not.
I'm not saying politically. I'm saying in conversations.
Oh, kind of like a Machiavellian or like some sort of like,
I wouldn't
like
go that far with him.
Like rhetorical. Like this is kind of where I want the conversation to go. Kind of like what Destiny does. To an extent.
Yes, definitely very.
Also,
Destiny-like.
if my mic levels are too low, let me know.
You're sounding good on my end, man. Okay, beautiful voice, beautiful.
All right.
Man. But we also have Leighton here. My streams are always crazy. Maybe we should have introduced everyone. Of course, everyone knows me.
We said hi to one another.
Jab. What do you want to say about yourself?
I guess I'm Jab Slant. Jab for short. I just hang out on the internet. I haven't been around for a while because I'm a pretty busy guy in real life. I don't really have time to be here on this online space because I actually have a life and like to touch grass every once in a while.
Oh, God.
You losers.
People are gonna give me shit for that. They'll be like, "What did you bring on this guy who told us to touch grass?" Damn.
Yeah. So I'm just here to chill, here to have a chat. It's been a while since I've spoken to you fine gentlemen. I've never spoken to you, Leighton, but I've spoken to Vincent a number of times, and that would be a fun discussion.
I agree.
Will be Leighton. Sorry to interrupt your chill streams to do this slightly less chill stream.
No, it's fine. It's very, very chill for me. Very chill.
Do you think this discussion will be contentious? Because I feel like this beef, quote unquote, very heavy emphasis on the quotes between EFAP and YMS is pretty tameless, kind of not even beef, more like store-bought baloney,
it's manufactured drama, and
it's not,
frankly,
it's not super dramatic. It's just like like we're kind of parting ways. Something's not super working out,
Yeah, I think
I don't think there's like bad blood between them. It's not like the Southpaw versus EFAP situation.
Oh yeah, let's hope it's not like that. Doesn't.
It hasn't evolved into that. Yeah. No.
But yeah, definitely YMS here has an issue with the community, but in the actual discussion they talk about how people would frame how Adam would sort of come off in his little critique of the critical. But let's wait until we actually get there.
Hmm.
We're gonna probably skip a lot of it, but let's get to the main meat of it.
To understand, not
Yes.
like it was. Yeah, thank you. It's incredible. It's incredible in the comments to the EFAP stream how like charged people are to
So
think
he's
that it's some
focusing
sort
on the
of, like,
comments.
epic ownage, or like that I was doing some sort of like detailed attack video, or that I was like poisoning the well by stating my anecdotal experiences and showing my biases to make my biases known. They're like, you're poisoning the well. It's crazy. People got way too like it's.
Well, it's the
I couldn't
internet,
imagine
Adam, come
taking
on.
things that seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I guess in terms of like audience perception, I know they go into this a little bit later on,
Yes.
but I don't know if I'll be around for that. So if you mind, you think we could talk about it here a little bit? Because
I'm probably gonna speed through this. This isn't gonna do just a review. We're gonna get the context and skip
Well, I mean, this is
around.
like an hour and 40 minutes. This
Yeah,
rough
it's sped
cut.
up, and we're probably gonna skip around when we get to certain points. As I said, I should have edited this down, but I was lazy. Sorry, Matt, guys. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
So do you mind if we go ahead and kind of talk
Yeah.
about the kind of audience perception part?
Yeah, that is actually one of the most important components of this,
Mhm.
because
So
I
I
am
guess-
very curious about the sort of symbolic, the sort of parasocial relationship, how that sort of cycles from creator to audience to creator.
Well, I
And there's
guess
definitely-
just to narrow the discussion to specifically YMS and EFAP or EFAP's community, or also critical drinkers community. And
Yeah, it's good to narrow it down in this case. Yes.
I guess when talking about it specifically within this case, YMS in this clip, when he's talking to Sitch and Adam, he almost talks, he's like, it's incredible that they could walk away with this negative perception of me, in kind of like this almost form of righteous indignation. Like, like it's crazy that anyone would have that thought. But when we get a little bit later into it, I think there's quite a few moments where I think it's kind of understandable for people to think that, or for people to walk away with a negative interpretation of what YMS is saying about the critical drinker.
From his original video or from the actual discussion in the EFAP?
From his original video. I don't think it was bad faith at all, but I don't think it's the most unreasonable interpretation to walk away with. Maybe you could say it's at worst a little bit uncharitable towards against YMS, and a little bit charitable towards critical drinker if you're already a fan of his.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I think what he's trying to do, which probably is poorly done, is actually an overall good thing. He's trying to frame,
I agree.
He's going into this,
appreciate
his audience
methodology.
has it within that. Because have either of you guys seen some of the sort of hit pieces by like Pillar of Garbage, some of his sort of videos
I
on
don't-
critical drinker at all? I've covered a few of those and defended.
No, I'm not
critical
familiar with
drinker.
I don't know if that person's opinion is worth anything to any discussion ever.
You are probably right in that. He definitely doesn't have the media literacy I think it takes to actually analyze anyone outside of his own echo chamber. But is it better for YMS to not frame this even as badly as he might have did with, his sort of perspective on it, his very skewed perspective, which he admits? Or is it better to just go in acting like, let's not go in with any bias at all? I have certain concepts that I don't want to explain beforehand because I don't want to sort of frame the audience, because a lot of content creators don't think like about all these fallacies, poison the well, and all that stuff.
I guess strategically, it's something that you probably want to be kind of careful. I think he said that like he prepared the stream. He didn't even prepare for the stream. He did it like in a rush, kind of like the day before he was supposed to go on a flight.
Yeah.
So there is an element of like maybe you should have waited a little bit and pre-planned things a tiny bit more. I know he does
Maybe
more
he
like
should have
kind of
did his
casual.
research before he just live streamed sort of his first impression based on Russell Brand.
Maybe.
I feel
part
like
of
the
it
whole
is-
thing kind of reeks of that lack of planning. Yeah, it's how it
but
comes
maybe
off.
you could send that sort of criticism to really just live streaming as a format rather than YMS specifically. But
Yeah.
it's not to say that you like, obviously EFAP does like a lot of pre-planned podcasts beforehand, right? And things still don't go like super smoothly on their end a lot of the time in terms of things said or misinterpretations or things that are misconstrued, right? Because we're still like we're still humans, we're still fallible, right? Especially when we're in front of a live audience where things are being recorded in real time.
Yeah, it's like it makes me wonder if perhaps if YMS had all of the previous insight and had all of the information that we have about the situation, would he have still come to the same conclusions that he had came to unchallenged? And that's the interesting question to me. Personally, I think he would have, because I feel like he's basing his opinions more so in something political than about the actual, content of Drinker's stuff.
No, you can continue. Sorry, I was kind of cutting you off.
No, I mean that's how it feels. Like I don't know that, but it's like that's how it feels to me. Yeah.
There's also the optical argument within that. As for my little criticism of Star Wars can't grow up, that was mainly an optical one, how it comes off. And as we get into this, we can skip ahead because we all get the gist of this. And this is a bad start. He starts with like, oh, Critical Drinker went on Russell Brand. That's really interesting. Let me take this.
Yeah.
I can see why that comes off a little bit weird and spontaneous.
Yeah, and kind of the way he says it, he's like, like what does that tell you about Critical Drinker that he went on to Russell Brand, or like what does it tell you about like kind of the audience he's cultivated? It's like you're not exactly
he does
saying
have a
it,
point
but
there. He does have a point there.
Yeah,
Does
like
anyone disagree with the fact that he does have a point? And
yeah, that like Critical Drinker is like vaguely anti-SJW or kind of appeals more to that space. Hence, he would probably like. I think Mauler puts it best. Like he appeals to a broad range, or maybe it was Rags that said it. He appeals to a broad range of people in that kind of sphere, from like the crazies to the more moderate. But because it's that sphere, it's kind of like anything goes, right? Like a lot of people, like to use, I guess, Destiny as an example. It's like he's obviously center of left leaning, but because
I wouldn't even say that. Destiny is more progressive, but on the moderate end.
Yeah, like moderate progressive, but he can be kind of buddy with the right wing people before, obviously Lauren Southern, Nick Fuentes, Sneeko, if you consider Sneeko right wing, but
I don't consider Red Pill truly. I'm starting to think they might be part of the post-liberal movement, but that's just thoughts.
Regardless, like people like Destiny describes this as the like the spider web, right? Like you have these associations on the outside. You have like the maybe like the more moderate associations on the outside, and the further you go in, it's like, okay, you have Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad is connected to his.
Remember, he was on EFAP, so that makes all EFAP.
Yeah. It's kind of like what Hassan said. It's like,
yeah,
J because EFAP because Sargon. That's why they're Nazis, right? Because they had Sargon of Akkad on.
The thing that I really don't like is just because everyone assumes YMS and Hassan are both on the left, all these leftist creators are sort of just building off of each other and they have the same worldview. And at least from what I've seen, I would have rather had a YMS fan here to stand represent for YMS, because I do respect him, but I'm not the biggest fan of him. But especially
I
in
like
this
his
debate.
movie reviews. I don't respect the guy politically at all.
Of course not. He's a gay furry. That's a little bit weird. Okay, sorry.
Wow, homophobia.
I mean, I appreciate his knowledge of like film and things like that. It's like his Lion King review. That's top notch. That's great. That's great shit.
Yeah.
But
he's
it's like-
definitely not afraid to like criticize, I guess, like more a what you could call woke messaging in media if it comes to the detriment of the film, right? Like he's not so ideologically he's not so ideologically aligned with the media that he can't also criticize it, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's good about that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's he is good about that. But I feel like with someone like Mauler, you can see their love for cinema coming through, and it's being filtered. It's being filtered more so through the love for cinema or the quality of the writing. And with someone like YMS, you perhaps could see more of a political slight on something. Like he talked about what was the something of freedom? What was that?
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. Yeah.
Nothing
He talked about
that
Sound of Freedom. I
situation.
can't imagine him ever doing a Sound of Freedom review.
Yeah,
on
he sort of bitched out on that. I checked up on that. He's like, I'm definitely going to do it. I haven't seen him do anything on that. From what I hear
I haven't
from
seen the
even a
movie, so I don't know
more,
any of the political
I don't know
discussions.
either, but just for the sake of this, I saw probably the best non-political guy, JJ, not JJ, Abrams. No, he's a reviewer. I forget his name. It's like
Niccolo?
John something.
Oh,
He's
you mean
like
Jeremy Johns?
Yeah, I think it's Jeremy Johns. I saw his review of it, and it seems rather positive about it. But he was sort of having a.
Yeah, I mean,
sort
I
of,
heard good things from people who aren't like super political.
but it still doesn't.
I also heard people who were going to see the film explicitly because it was political. So
Yeah, they definitely use that as a marketing tactic, and I guess critical drinker. Let me let Leighton sort of stand. Do you think you can stand why he would be fine with it, even if it has a slight political slant to it? Critical drinker on the Sound of Freedom, or
Why
should
should I
I-
be fine with it? Like,
when they use a sort of a moral messaging to sort of push the message later on in the Russell Brand episode. Let's actually look at that. We can go to a particular episode, particular instances, or not. We'll get to it.
I suspect
Okay,
he's
but it's something to keep in mind.
I suspect he's okay with the messaging and also able to take the movie on the qualities of what it is. It's whereas YMS, he could probably take the movie on the quality as it is, but probably wouldn't be as okay with the messaging. Right? There's some movies that just don't appeal to you in one of two
Let's
ways.
not poison the well against YMS here, okay? Don't you think he's pro? I'm joking partially, okay? It's almost someone could misinterpret that like YMS is all for child trafficking and conspiracy land.
Well,
That was
see,
mostly
that's the overtly conservative opinion. It's like, well, if you don't like this movie, well, you clearly must be okay with child
that I do
that's
not
that's
like.
insane too.
Christ.
Yeah,
That's almost the inverse of if you don't like this movie with a black actor, you're racist. It's the inverse
exactly.
of it, and I do not like the double standards
Well, it's-
people apply.
I don't know if it's the inverse as much as it is the same, just with a different lens or a different end of the political spectrum.
Good to know. Sound of Freedom was a great movie, though. McNilo.
McNilo.
Am I pronouncing that wrong? Oh, Nilo.
I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. We had a lot of good talk on it. Let's start at a certain point. All my streams are like chaos theory in action.
It was the critical drinker, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I like his videos," and it's not because they
Guess you
care
could
about
say
film
your
as
streams
an
are
art
some
form.
organized
It's because there's kind of
chaos.
a
Yeah.
Ha.
implied, whether intentional or not by the drinker, whether intentional or not. There
See,
is
I
kind
like that intentional or not. The attention, like Andrew Clark. No matter the outcome, the intent behind it, the sort of effect it has, can be actually focused on. Do either of you guys have problems with that sort of belief there?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
No matter what the attention, because I don't like mind reading, but you can sort of sort of see the outcome. Like, no matter if Ryan Kennel is racist, like a lot of people are sort of putting out there, racist people will pick up on some of his criticism of there's no good people in the Batman movie. If you know about that example, the
Yeah.
cherry picked example that like the anti-woke like to use against like Ryan Kennel for that particular case.
Yeah, people took that video way out of context. I don't even like Ryan Kennel, but
Yeah, I don't like
criticisms of that were
his
fucking
content
retarded.
either, but it's just stupid. But yeah, no matter but there is an argument, no matter the intent. Yeah, some people will perceive him. Okay.
I think that the intent and outcome are both valuable things to sort of measure and address and analyze in their own rights, either apart or together, you know.
Yes, but it's always hard to tell
depends.
the intent, but you can sort of extrapolate the outcome.
Mhm.
Kind of like an implied level of intent from, we could say, the filmmakers, we could say the studios, we could say corporations, we could, you know, some people might even imply like the government or something. But there's this overarching sort of like, you know, we talk about how men can't be presented in this way. There are people that watch his channel. I'm assuming this, but I don't think that it's an unfair assumption. I think that there's a good chunk of people that watch his channel that probably that are the type of person that think that there's like a nefarious plot to try and like feminize men, right? Like there's people that believe that, and I'm not saying that
Okay. Yeah. Do you guys agree with that sentiment? They're just by the number wise.
Well,
talk about an overlapping audience.
to
It's like,
say like
yeah.
feminize men.
Yeah, he
like,
definitely uses some outrageous
depending on
terminology
how sort
that
of
I do
esoteric
disagree
you want
with
to get.
it.
Sorry.
I'm saying he definitely used verbose, over the top language that I don't necessarily agree with on at least the autistic
I think
reading of
he-
that.
I
But the
does-
spirit of it, I generally can vibe with.
I think he, from what I remember, he seems to have almost conflates like, almost conflates like criticisms of, I guess you could call woke Hollywood kind of pushing an agenda or messaging or whatever with like
The critical drinker, right?
With like anti-vax conspiracy.
Okay.
Stuff.
YMS here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, YMS does that. When I feel like one of those is significantly more reasonable than the other, like obviously COVID vaccine conspiracy.
My
stuff,
body, my
I don't know a
choice,
whole
yes.
bunch about, but like obviously that conceptually is a little bit more out there versus like, oh yeah, there's like agenda pushing in Hollywood. It's like,
Yeah,
like,
no shit.
those two, like-
Most places push
like there's very clearly a left-wing bias, or I guess you could call a woke bias in Hollywood. Like I don't think anyone's denying that, right?
No, I don't even think YMS denies it. He has a completely different criticism against critical drinker.
Well, I mean,
total.
he just kind of used like, oh well, there's a plot to feminize men in Hollywood. Like that's a part of his audience, and he's kind of presenting that in an almost like extreme sort of fashion. When I feel like the kind of feminizing of men isn't like super deniable, right? It's like, yeah, they're kind of pushing for more.
Well,
kind of,
there is
emasculated
the
role
movement
for
of
men.
destroying gender
like, they're trying-
stereotypes.
Yeah, they're trying to like push women into these kind of higher positions of generally or generically traditionally masculine roles, while they're more so reducing men to either being kind of bumbling idiots, or I cringe when I say this, but beta males almost. Right.
At least
like,
they're not cucks like Destiny is barely. IJP
well,
Max
like,
and
I mean,
love the gays.
I mean, do any of us disagree with that? That like that's something that's happening in Hollywood?
I think it's horrible phrasing. Go on.
Well, I mean, I would say, yeah, okay, you could definitely say, yeah, that's happening in Hollywood. But I think what YMS is saying is that there would be a more of an inclination to judge something on its messaging and less so on its less so on its actual merits, its writing merits.
Yeah.
I think that's the criticism that YMS is bringing to the table here. You know, that
Yes.
there would be an over focus on the messaging, which I don't believe that about Critical Drinker stuff. But yeah, I feel like that
I believe he
intention.
does do it, but he sort of pulled back from it for a while. He has leaps and bounds.
Kind of go either
okay?
way, I guess.
His idea of the message, he uses that instead of woke, and I think that's a decent framing. But it's sort of also so vague. The audience can project whatever they want on it, also, and I think there's an inherent problem with that. That's just my sort of reading on that. It's people can project whatever they want on the message. When you're talking about wokeness, which has its own issues with definitional crap like that, but that's besides the point there. You were going to say something before I so rudely interrupted, right?
I know, it's so terrible of you. No, this is your stream. You're allowed to do whatever the hell you want.
Well, I am a freedom seeker, so I should have watched The Sound of Freedom. I'm such a betrayer of the freedom seeker of me. Go on.
I think there is a part of that, but I think YMS is also commentating on the audience crossover, the extreme audience crossover. Like, he brings up, obviously, Critical Drinker being connected to Russell Brand as kind of an an example of extreme audience crossover. And then he's also using like, oh, you know, like whatever, or Hollywood feminizing men, or like there being this horrible plot to sort of emasculate.
Saying that's reductive about Critical Drinker makes sense, but YMS is very loose with language.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think YMS is definitely. I'm just taking issue kind of with the conflation of those two things. I do think that Layden, you're right. He does talk about how a criticism he has is that the drinker focuses too much on the sort of messaging or the sort of anti-SJW aspect of the reviews that he does. But I think he's also talking about the extremity in the crossover of Drinker's audience with other sort of political he's also kind of not necessarily criticizing, but highlighting, you could say, the kind of more extreme aspects of Drinker's audience. And I think he's
perfectly valid to actually bring that up, at least within the context of him going on Russell Brand.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that he's using like there being like some agenda to kind of almost feminize men in Hollywood as an extreme example of, or as there being like some sort of extremity in Drinker's audience. That's what I'm saying, and I'm kind of taking issue with that. I don't think it's that crazy to think.
Yes, it's hyperbolic sort of explanation of that. And as to the Critical Drinker, Layton might want to push back on me on this. There is some, again, with the mixed messaging, with the Pandaverse episode, he literally, his open bar, he had on the representative Heels versus Babyface as in that conversation, along with the king of the clickbait of woke, Inaman. I always forget how to say his name. He always clickbait woke in his sort of title. And I think that was really poor optics in that case when you're talking about it. Having those two on in there. But that's a completely separate matter that I'm not trying to poison the well. I just wanted to bring that up real quick. Any sort of thoughts on that before we move on? Or
I'm sorry, I don't know if we're having the same conversation. I'm not saying that in a critical way. I'm just saying I don't know if you I don't know if we're entirely grasping one another's points. Not to
I'm just poisoning the well myself. Okay, with the outside example. A little cheeky humor for me.
What I'm trying to say is I have issue with YMS seemingly conflating.
Yes, and I did this
agenda.
There's an
agenda in Hollywood to vaccine conspiracy theories.
Yeah, sorry,
which Layden seemed to disagree with.
Okay. Leighton, do you disagree with that?
If you repeat that one more time, I'm sorry. We're comparing with what now?
He YMS saying that there's some agenda pushing specifically in regard to like sort of feminization or masculization of men. And I think he's putting that in the same category as vaccine conspiracy theories, which I don't agree with. I think one is more reasonable.
I think he's putting it in the same category as conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and I'm taking issue with that. But earlier you said that you thought he was using it as an example of he was using it as an example of like some sort of lens that the critical drinker would view a movie through instead of viewing the movie on its own merits.
Well, I think he's saying that it's something that the audience could perhaps come to view. Like if you're coming from the BitChute, type crowd, and then you're coming
Wrestle brand pushes.
And then you're coming to watch these movies. I think what YMS is saying is that perhaps because people are coming from these more extreme type platforms, or they're more known for being more extreme, at least, that there's potential that they would only look at it through the lens of political messaging and not look at it through the lens of good writing. But that's what I feel like would be the case. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and they bring that up much later. Mauler brings that up. That's like 90%, and that they would be. A lot of people would put EFAP in that camp, even though they try their best to stay non-political and even push back against some of the ideas like Dead Space. Something that you told me you wanted to take out of your edit, Dead Space and other shit like that.
Well, I guess the way to resolve this would be to do a little rewind. It's rewind time. Maybe go back like 30 seconds or so.
Okay, yeah.
If you would, good sir.
Oh, I'm not as good as you think. I almost poisoned the well of what in sort of talk past you. Okay.
Oh no, you're fine.
How dare you?
We could say the filmmakers, we could say the studios, we could say corporations, we could, some people might even imply like the government or something. But there's this overarching sort of like, we talk about how men can't be presented in this way. There are people that watch his channel. I'm assuming this, but I don't think that it's an unfair assumption. I think that there's a good chunk of people that watch his channel that probably that are the type of person that think that there's like a nefarious plot to try and like feminize men, right? Like there's people that believe that, and I'm not saying that Critical Drinker is the reason why they believe it, but that there's enough of that sort of conspiracy shit going on the internet that his channel is not through any intent of his own, but his channel is kind of like
I was going to
I was absolutely right. I was absolutely correct. Sorry.
It's just a matter of the sort of how seriously you're taking him, but the conspiracy there are some people who like the Alex Jones turning the frogs gay and shit like that. Depends on how literally you're taking it. Like, are they drugging men to, or the trans conspiracy? It's really, I'll agree. It's really vague, and I'm looking at the ESG is real. Of course, it's real. Okay, what does it do? What effect it has? I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah,
but sort of a comment.
It almost feels like he's presenting it as, there's these really crazy conspiracy theories that they're trying pushing an agenda to men or emasculate men in Hollywood. Like that's crazy.
Really, someone should have stopped him and had him clarify.
Necessarily agrees with this, but like he could maybe kind of reinforce that. I don't feel like it's that crazy of a thing to believe. Is kind of what I'm saying. But
it depends on how far you take the feminization of men. If they think the government is literally putting something in the vaccine to make men sterile or feminize or anything like that, they're pushing men to turn trans. There's just so many ways to interpret that. I don't like reading into it too much, but I do understand your perspective about the sort of socialization of trying to stamp down on toxic masculinity and sort of get rid of these strong male character role models in films to sort of demotivate it young men growing up watching all this media from that. It's just a wide margin of how bad the conspiracy theory is. That's all I'm pointing out there. But yeah, I do get your general point. It definitely could be misinterpreted. What YMS could be, and what YMS means might not be necessarily how you're interpreting it. You understand my point with that?
Yeah, I think so. But it's a little bit of a digression, so we can kind of
yeah, it is a digression.
Reaffirming those beliefs that way without directly saying it. And again, I'm not saying he's being like sneaky or manipulative or like crypto, but I'm saying that like just because those things exist, those different beliefs, because they exist and because they essentially complement each other in terms of how like perspective of the channel, the premise of some of the content on the channel, it seems to complement itself in that way. Like those two types of demographics, I mean.
To draw us back, though, because what you've said now about the context of what you're talking about here sounds way more reasonable and accurate. The only other trouble I have now is that I assume you'd agree that this applies to 99.9% of YouTube film reviews channels.
99.9?
Sure.
What?
Yeah.
Like I'm talking about a very specific, like we're talking about like.
I'm not talking about
people...
the feminizing stuff. I'm talking all the way back about what you said, focusing audiences that are drawn in for entertainment.
Oh, sure, yeah, there's people that watch my videos for the memes. Yeah, I'm not as much concerned about like, you know, like Jeremy fucking Johns talks about only popular movies. You know, like the premise of what I'm talking about, the only reason.
And I think Jeremy Johns actually does a much better job of reducing his bias and not letting people think that. What would you guys say? Like Jeremy Johns versus Critical Drinker?
Oh yeah, I mean, Critical Drinker is almost, well, I don't know if I want to call him explicitly political, but he's, well, I would say Critical Drinker is pretty political, but not specifically for a. Yeah, I would call him he's definitely more politically inclined than Jeremy Johns. Like he has his pretty well stated biases.
Yeah, it's like I would say Critical Drinker is definitely political in the sense that like it may not like go off on my sensors whenever I hear it, but I know if other people were to hear it, you know, coming from a different political bias, they would probably latch on to things.
Whereas with Jeremy Johns is just kind of a guy who talks about media.
Yeah,
and I think EFAP are also kind of in that same boat, but they're kind of they're often thrown. Well, they're thrown.
Well, it sort of Rags' fault sometimes. You have to admit that Rags
specifically, but EFAP as a whole, including Mauler, like they're not very.
But that you could say the same about some of the guests with left-wing bias, like JXE, when they come on. With
I was just about to say they tend to get lumped into certain camps because of who they're associated with, rather than like specific political bends that they have on their own.
Yeah, keep politics out of it by and large, I'd say.
Yeah, and like same thing with Sitch and Adam, right?
Yeah. Harvey is like just a really weird thing to me.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was like, Sitch and Adam are pretty I would say they're pretty political, right?
Oh, of course,
yeah,
political.
Definitely. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. They've been going after the sort of.
I was talking about specifically like specific political camps. Like they've had Shu on Head On and Anna Kasparian on and Kyle Kolensky on, and like they've had discussions where they're agreeing a lot with those people, but then they've also had on like Sargon or.
Where they actually disagreed with Sargon the last time, if I remember correctly. Yes.
Yeah, but like they have Sargon on, and they have agreed with a good bit. So like they kind of get lumped into that category as well, and they rag on the left a lot.
Yeah, and even EFAP, they'll sort of find this sort of woke stuff very cringe, but it's not a political thing. It's more of a writing perspective, which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
But
I
you
really
could say the same about those Christian movies. I hate people bringing up those Christian movies.
I agree with you.
But yeah, you'll find both sides, and I hope. Let me not even get into the Daily Wire. I was brushing up on my YMS, and I was watching a little bit of his coverage of the Daily Wire Snow White.
Oh,
Snow White. I wish them all the best, but still probably going to be cringe. And even in that, YMS seemed to have the misconception that Daily Wire focused on children's media when they've done something like the former
Lady Ballers recently, right?
Yeah, more.
That's
Well,
definitely
that's
not a kids'
recent.
movie.
This was a month ago they did this, but they had the thing with I can't
Didn't
remember
they do
her
the
name.
one
She was
movie
from
about a
Star
school
Wars.
shooting?
Yeah, Run, Hide, Fight.
Gina
Also,
Carano?
they've had movies before all this children's stuff that they're promoting now. So that's something where YMS is sort of lack of research is sort of could mislead his audience. And yeah, I can definitely criticize him for that, but I think he does a well job of establishing that he's going into this sort of blind with the streaming. As you were saying earlier, Jab, it's a better criticism of streamer culture. And I think EFAP, for the most part, at least in their research beforehand, they're good about it. I have issues with sort of their methodology, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they like I know at least Mauler tends to react to videos beforehand, or he'll watch very long streams and like clip them up and put them together, like with Synthetic Man or with Hassan, and I
have my issues with that Synthetic Man video, but I have a particular associate who's a fan.
Yeah, I've seen that video of yours.
I like pushback. I like people to give me the other side's perspective. I might not necessarily agree with it, but I like to come from a place of understanding with those people, even if I think they're insane. Not that I'm saying Anna Waifu's insane. Don't clip this. Don't share this with her. Please don't.
I don't know. That Synthetic Man video is kind of hard to defend. I will say, but
the only way you can defend a lot of Synthetic Man is it's just ironic humor. But let's not get too far into that.
Yeah, it's definitely, but not.
Yeah,
but definitely,
sure.
but not. But and then and then there's so many layers of irony removed that you're no longer in the same plane of existence.
Yeah, McNilo had a video on Synthetic Man. I doubt he's here still. I like to ramble on. Busy people with busy videos. But yeah, let's start it up again.
Why the critical drinker is like a subject of conversation for me, and it makes it interesting, is not just like, oh, he covers popular movies most of the time and doesn't go to film festivals or whatever. It's that through the lens of which him covering those films, it's not just, there's people that are looking for entertainment. It's that there are people that have this very bizarre conspiracy theory of how the world works, and that there's someone trying to change culture in a way for nefarious reasons. And again, I'm not saying that Critical Drinker believes those things or is even aware that his content is necessarily complementing those things. But, like a lot of the takeaways of his videos, or a lot of the lens through which he creates his content, is essentially like, okay, like male characters can't be presented like this because, they're trying to correct a perceived problem of how male characters have been represented. And since there's a lot of it that does talk about that,
yeah, he sounds like he's looking at this through a sort of leftist lens. He's framing pretty much how right wingers are.
He hadn't seen many of Drinker's videos.
Yeah,
I feel like Drinker doesn't often say, "Oh, the female character can't be represented this way," because like they're trying to subvert whatever thing. It's more so like how the female character is.
This is more about the sort of audience argument that a lot of his sort of the message and some of his sort of talking points, I really hate that terminology, sort of feeds into this sort of conspiracy minded. And I will say at face value, that has some merits to it, but you could say that about hell. With the sort of I hate getting too political, but I have to because honesty is the best policy. Sort of with the pro-Palestine and Israel stuff, sort of the the far right anti-Semite sort of coming out in force because the left are being anti-Semitic also. It's given sort of cover for the rightoids because the left is doing it. Do you understand the point I have with bringing that up in this instance?
No, I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time?
The sort of cover that the leftoids are being anti-Semitic, so the rightoids are coming out more in force with their anti-Semitism. Maybe it's a stupid point. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Was it Hassan that was liking Groiper memes.
Yeah, it's a weird, weird world we live in, and definitely the way YMS is framing this, almost is making it. He's framing it from a leftist, almost personal perspective, like these fans. He keeps on framing this like this, and I think there's some valid point to how dedicated some of these people who are fans of Star Wars and Marvel movies tie their identity to these franchises. Do you think there's any merit to that at all? The fandom culture.
There's you're always gonna have, I guess, the consumerism meme of people definitely get too dedicated in wrapping up their identities in a certain like franchise or certain identity, or really just any kind of political ideology as it is.
Yeah, any sort of team you can identify with. And
it becomes a part of you, so any criticism of it becomes a criticism.
And I think in this politically polarized environment we have, it even has seeped into fandom culture, this sort of a mindset that's within politics.
I mean, social media almost kind of seemingly amplified that by 10, right? Algorithms
and they
that are
conflate
geared
to nothing can be everything's political.
And outrage.
How long have we been living in the soup of everything is political and people trying to push back on it?
Well, it's just that everything can be political. That's the thing.
Yes.
Everything may not be political, but everything can definitely be political.
See, I find this argument stupid because politics is downstream of sort of the baseline principles that people hold. And those baseline principles that are either developed through growing up or could be genetically disposition within someone, given their sort of lineage to go right wing, left wing, that isn't a political, that's just sort of a right brain. Do you think more logically, or do you think more creative? Or do you think more, are you more creative or are you more logical? That sort of logical versus creative sort of framework within people's brain goes upstream to politics. But I think culture.
Sorry, I'm going to run to the bathroom really quickly.
Okay. Got it. But yeah.
Leave your chair to entertain people. Yeah.
Yeah. Jab has a squeaky chair. I forgot about that. But do you know what I'm talking about with the sort of thing? One of my biggest problems is that the baseline understanding of people, they have their particular bias, and those biases tend to go upstream to the politics they pick in the end. And it's also really their personal bias sort of also can radically alter what sort of media that they will want to consume. Both those things
I was going to say, to your point, people do lean towards things that reinforce their biases. Yeah, by and large, I think that's like a fact about people, is that they will tend to gravitate towards, like if you watch the new Star Wars and like Admiral Holdo pisses you off, well, that's probably not going to be the case for some people with other biases. But then if that same person who didn't share those biases goes and watch EFAP, it's almost guaranteed they're going to lock into it, right? Because what they're seeing may not have anything to do with their biases. Like they might just be critiquing the writing, about Admiral Holdo not sharing the plans, but because there's that critique of the writing, and that also shares in the biases of the people who just could not get along with it on the big screen, they're going to gravitate towards it, even though there's nothing inherently political about it. Like, so I think people do that unconsciously. Yeah.
Yeah. On an unconscious level, they try to put everything in boxes. Okay. And I think as much as I hate the sort of spectrum method of the left, because of how I think it has some merit, not as much as the left wants to conflate it, like with gender, but there is a certain amount of not everything's going to be black or white. I definitely hate the sort of binary thinking, but that gray area is just so hard to actually explore, and there's so much going to be so much disagreement within that sort of gray area of nuanced positions. It's easy just to take the sort of instead of right or left, the sort of black view of it or the white view of it, like with the fan in sort of the fandom. You have the fanboys and you have the antis, or the fanboys and you have the antis. Okay, it's just easier to pick one of those two sides instead of having a more nuanced perspective on everything: media, politics, blah blah blah.
It is easier to support one team or another in a football game. However, it is very difficult to love the game so much that you're not supporting any team, but you're still watching it.
Yeah, you're enjoying the sport for basically the sheer excitement.
Yeah, that's actually a
and
really good way
athletic.
of putting it. I never thought of it like that.
That's how I look at it.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a smart analogy, sir.
Well, maybe what if I root for the ref? Like those teams better not rough up the ref or give him any shit. I'm on team ref.
What if I root for the naked guy that comes into the field via?
Then I will judge you for that job. So that's just a joke, man. I mean, I'll
if he
respect
can run the
it.
touchdown.
Hey, yeah.
That would be base. Very base there. But yeah, get a little bit.
You know, I tried to relate to him and what sort of things do you watch on YouTube? You know, like film stuff. And he's like, oh, I watch The Critical Drinker, and that will always leave an impression.
Maybe.
But I guess
okay, let me go back a little bit.
Than just an anecdotal experience, but I made it pretty
To bring up before we've seen anything to do with drinking.
Okay, yeah.
Insightful. So
So you just mentioned this.
We all know what he was just talking about. His experience with a friend's boyfriend or something, using as a conspiracy brain person.
Yeah. Do we want to talk, or were you guys just talking about that?
No, let's go on with this and see what they go over.
Friend of a friend or whatever that has a lot of sort of conspiracy brain sort of things, but also happens to watch Critical Drinker. Do you think that's a fair thing to bring up before we've seen anything to do with Drinker yet?
I mean, if I was trying to present it as anything other than just
see, Mauler doesn't say that YMS is poisoning the well here, but he's implying it rather heavily. So this is definitely why probably a lot of the audience. Do I think it's unfair of Mauler to actually bring that up? Not necessarily. I would like to know why he sort of brings this.
Well, I think it's something
explain
perfectly
it.
fine to be. I think it's something perfectly fine to be concerned with. Like just again, optically speaking, I think he does say like he thinks YMS didn't do it maliciously, but that I think his exact words were it's strategically unfair to Drinker.
Yep.
There's
like I've never seen one of Jab Slant's videos, but I know there's this Holocaust denier. He told me once that he loves Jab Slant's videos, right? It would be like, well, yeah, it would be a very weird thing to say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but
I agree. But if you sort of prime your audience, I mean, maybe YMS just doesn't expect his sort of content be viewed outside of his own audience, and you can definitely say that.
I think in defense of this, he says that like a good portion of his audience weren't taking it in like a super biased direction, but a portion of his I recently right before the stream I went into the top comments of this video, and a lot of them are like hardcore shitting on Drinker, like, oh yeah, he's like an anti-woke, like whatever, he's like hardcore into this right-wing, red pill shit.
Go on. I got that.
So
if you want to go into that,
even though there's a sizable portion of his audience that are like, oh yeah, I think that you made some fair criticisms, or like, I like both of you guys, you're both cool, like this was a pretty fair and balanced review. A good portion of the top comments are also like, oh yeah, Critical Drinker's terrible, he's like politically horrible, or he has all these political biases, he's not a valid reviewer, yada yada yada.
Am I hearing something in the background, like ha ha from the Simpsons?
Sorry, there.
Okay.
That was
They're
just tickle me
children
Elmo.
nearby.
I'm just making sure I'm not going insane. Okay. I'm just making sure I'm not hearing Simpsons in my brain. Or sounds like whatever that dude is. Okay. Okay. I'm actually an idiot. I didn't bring it up. Let me actually bring it up. No, this is actually better. Comment section. Okay. So yeah, let's just take a look. I'd like to take a look at the more upvoted ones. So
I learned
this is the
everything I
YMS
needed to
video?
know about. Sorry.
see, that's not even a really upvoted one. And there might be some
Well, it's more
pushback on-
recent as well.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Good point.
Mhm.
If you want to read it. Everything I need.
I learned everything I needed to know about the critical drinker from the first video I saw of him when he learned that Phoebe Waller-Bridge had been brought in as a writer on Time to Die. He said that it was going to it was going to make it woke feminist garbage like Fleabag was, or probably was.
Okay. Yeah, and this person is very judgmental. Okay. Yeah, okay. I do pay
And then,
attention. And you're right, it is
even
just
if you
1
do-
month ago.
But then you also have this really positive comment. Even if you don't like it, it's important to understand other people like this. This perspective resonates with me very strongly.
That's something I can
that's kind of
agree
like,
with.
like not necessarily against Drinker, not for Drinker either, but it's not like shitting on him. It's like, oh yeah, I can understand wanting to understand Drinker.
Yeah, I'm reading some of these replies to it. Has some interest in. I think personally, both why people should be at least a little bit more active, or at least have a sort of get a gauge of. This is a personal opinion of mine. Content creators, when they put out content, they don't have to even react to anyone, but maybe if they think there's some issues in the comments section, that they should do a pinned tweet of them to sort of nutshell it. But maybe I expect too much of these big content creators, because the
Mhm.
bigger you are, the harder it is to keep up with
So we've
everything.
got what you
Yep.
said about bias. Oh,
Sorry, did I go away? Yeah.
No,
what you said about bias in the past is 100% correct. We just have this nasty instinct to dismiss the idea or nostalgia of something for something isn't as close to the truth as we want it to be. That's kind of against Drinker, but it's more so agreeing with YMS rather than directly shitting on Drinker.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more nuance. Well,
Mhm.
let's look
And
at
then,
this one. This
but right under it says he doesn't care for Kubrick's 2001, but loves the 2010 sequel. That sums it up. That sums up his
Oh,
taste.
God.
Yeah,
very
It's a
reductive.
low blow.
Yeah, it is.
I liked the
There's-
critical Drinker at first because he hated a movie I didn't like, and watched 2 more videos and was like, "Yeah, these movies suck. Sucks. He's right." Then I watched his reaction to a movie I never watched. It became clear exactly what perspective he goes through. I think
Okay.
that one's kind of shitting on Drinker as well. It's like, okay, yeah, all of these reviews are really similar because
Well, they do have a certain formula to them, a
Mhm.
sort of cadence, but that's the nature of critical drinkers' work. As they said, bite-sized pieces. And as much as people hate to admit it, formulas is the way to get popular. People have that comfort when someone has a formula and they sort of hit the same beats every time. That's how you build up a good fan base and good audience to be consistent.
Yeah.
It's funny, sort of the people who are against consistency in actual media when it comes to actually YouTube channels, they're fairly consistent, even if some of their consistent takes are rather crap. It's like they're trying to be consistent with all their other works, despite some logic. But let me look. Yeah. So
I mean,
I
but
wanna
yeah,
do
some of these are kind of shitting on Drinker. Others are more positive,
okay, I fucked.
or others are more positive or kind of neutral,
OnlyFans.
kind of in between.
Okay, and I sort of want to go over the sort of comments here. Here's my lovely marker before I
Wow.
gave up and went to Langton's edit of it. Let's take a
This
look at
episode, Linus tries to find
upvote
as
one.
many ways as possible. Oh, there's that top one right there.
Well,
You don't like film festivals, bro, in a 9-hour stream. It's quite disappointing to see YMS, who meticulously debunked the Kimba controversy in a 2-hour video, to emphasize the importance of doing thorough research for yourself, now seemingly voice opinions based solely on online chatter and gut reactions, rule for thee, but not for me.
I definitely don't like that. It's definitely an argument that he's going
Yeah,
in,
I think
letting
I
his.
disagree with that.
Well, it's not too upvoted. Okay, at
Mhm.
least Old Boy. Oh, more people need to watch Old Boy. Yeah, one
Yeah,
really
I heard Old
upvoted
Boy was
about
good.
rags.
I feel Rags pulling back, wanting to say, well, that's not conspiracy, that's fact. TLDR, Canadians angry at the Scottish guy because of American politics. That's definitely not stupid. Is YMS Canadian?
I really don't know.
I don't know if that's shitting on YMS or Drinker or both.
Yeah, no clue.
YMS, it's toxic to tell an audience their movie tastes aren't sophisticated enough. Also, YMS, he's so Marvel brained. Yeah, there's a good bit of also shitting on YMS and EFAP's comment section. There's probably
I think it's a
more
little bit
on
more
EFAP.
harsh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not,
Well,
not to
it's
say
good
not to say YMSs weren't harsh, but there's probably more neutral in YMS, but YMS still isn't, like golden across the board.
because so you think these comments actually affect the creators of EFAP at all?
So
Let's take a sidebar to talk about that. How much do you think I might be too biased with all of my experience in talking to various critics of EFAP on this, like Southpaw in particular? He tries to conflate what the audience EFAP does, and the same thing with former Doomer Politics. Talk to him about this subject matter. I could probably read. No, let me not do that. Let me not expose what Doomer
Don't-
Media thinks about it. But I do know that they both think that the audience sort of feeds into it, and EFAP does not take sort of enough responsibility to moderate their communities.
I know Mauler especially has a pretty hands-off approach when it comes to, I guess, kind of mediating his audience, or I guess you could say mediating his audience, which I have a little bit of respect for. Like, something that Hassan does a lot is he'll just kind of throw out all dissenting opinion, whereas Mauler, I don't think like ever deletes posts, or he explicitly has almost explicitly has a no ban chat. Like no ban chatter from his chat kind of rule, which I respect to an extent, but at the same time, it's kind of like you get kind of into weird icky areas around like audience responsibility. Like, are you responsible for what you say? Like, if there are people kind of geared towards a certain audience. But then I would say if EFAP were kind of anti that, it may be a little bit hypocritical for them to kind of criticize YMS for doing something that's optically bad towards Drinker because his audience is maybe geared against him already.
Any thoughts on that, Leighton?
No, I actually think he encapsulated my thoughts on it pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, I just have particular issues with people going into this content and sort of leading the audience to believe certain things in certain regards, as EFAP tends to do. Not directly, but with snide little humor and embracing the memes of it.
There's kind of
subtle encouragement of this, and not sort of correcting the record at a later point and being like, okay, sounds really gay. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna be the lefty
I
here.
agree. Like, I pretty much have Destiny's stance on kind of audience responsibility, I guess you could say, is you have to be, as influencers, we have to be careful with like how we kind of present ourselves, what audiences we cultivate. But
I don't even think this necessarily comes from Mauler most of the time. You can say, with the example I brought up, he sort of led the audience to believe, which they probably would have came on their own, that YMS was, and he does clarify he doesn't think he did it intentionally, which I think is a factor when you want to say,
it becomes
YMS is poisoning the well.
Sorry.
You can sort of say, yes, he unintentionally did it, but he definitely didn't have the intent. His intent was to sort of share his bias and how he perceived Critical Drinker going into this sort of a live stream of this Russell Brand thing, which definitely is a little bit tough. Why the Russell Brand thing? Because it definitely is weird. critical, despite what Mauler brings up later, Russell Brand does not invite people of dissenting opinions on his show. So it's almost like Russell Brand signaling to his audience that Critical Drinker is the type of reviewer you want to watch, and his audience mindset. So I understand the criticism from that side, and the fact that Critical Drinker doesn't really push back on that concept, doesn't do anything to sort of lay out any disagreements he might have with. I mean, I could have a bad reading of this sort of a Critical Drinker being on Russell Brand because of my own personal bias, but that's how I see it.
I mean, didn't YMS say that he would go on Russell Brand? If he had the
Yeah, a lot of
opportunity?
people are using that as a point, but would he actually, if he went on Russell Brand, would he just not push back on anything Russell Brand? That's, I think, something that is overlooked. Do you think YMS would react the same to a Russell Brand interview as Critical Drinker did?
Well, probably not in the same exact way, but
You think he would placate him to try to get his audience, or would he push back on him a lot more?
this
As
is
you said, he's a lot.
I think he would push back.
Okay.
probably push back more so than Drinker would, but I think Destiny puts this really well when he was. Sorry to keep quoting Destiny, but
Yeah, Destiny fanboy.
Even
Shut-
Bonnell.
all right, he's the goat. He's the king
Mhm.
of political streaming. All right, that's how it is. The blue-haired king of political streaming. Anyway,
Hey, I respect him more than some people, but
Anyway.
probably not as much as you.
anyway, like when he was kind of being harangued by his audience a little bit when he first went onto Tim Pool, a lot of his viewers didn't feel like he pushed back enough on some of what Tim Pool was saying. But some of it you have to realize is like to have sort of a maybe prolonged relationship with Tim Pool, like it's not like I'm going in here to hardcore shit on this person or hardcore disagree or hard yada yada, right? Because like they invited you onto their podcast, right? You probably are gonna want to be back on. 'cause
Oh,
it's not
feel
just-
free
it's
to
not just
shit on
politics
me.
or-
I have fun with that, but go on.
Okay, well, fuck you.
That's not very good shit.
I'll shit on you.
All right, fine. Your spelling is bad. Bam.
Damn.
Yeah, I know.
Your hair looks
I
funny.
said the quiet thing out loud. Okay.
I know.
Anyway, like just in terms of like normal human behavior, if you get invited onto someone's podcast, especially if it's a really large figure, you're probably not going to go on hardcore shitting and disagreeing with them unless you're trying to score points with like maybe your own political audience, or like you're that principled and that dedicated to, but like at that point it almost seems kind of naive and stupid.
Okay.
But
Fair
what do you
enough.
think about that?
It just, yeah, laid
It would
in.
be naive and stupid to go on to the podcast if
No,
And
to,
just
to
shit on
go
the-
on to go on and almost be absolutely combative against your host, right? Against the
I
person,
mean-
even if you disagree with that person, right?
I mean, if it was Destiny, I'd think they'd do it. You know.
Well, I mean, like Destiny definitely went against Tim Pool, but when he was on there, a lot of people in his audience didn't feel like he was pushing back. As
Oh,
hard
like
as
he would
could.
like meld. You would like kind
Mhm.
of shape shift into like the biases of the majority of the crowd, kind of just to be
No,
there. And,
like
No,
he would,
Destiny
he would
wouldn't
be a
do
lot
that,
harsher with his criticisms of Tim Pool while he was on there. Not to say he didn't criticize or wasn't at all critical.
right.
Of Tim Pool or didn't disagree with
Whenever I
him.
say shape shift, I mean like he's not going like 100%. Like I'm gonna fucking call you all out and you say the things that he would say if he was streaming
Yeah,
alone.
because
It's
like at
he-
that point, it
Mhm.
kind of feels like you're there to kind of score points or with your
Yeah,
own
you're
audience,
preaching.
or you're there to like
Oh,
hardcore
sorry
harangue
about the
some
sneeze.
guy who's been otherwise friendly to you on his own platform, right?
Yeah, I can see a certain case for that. In
Well,
some
like-
cases,
like
you wouldn't
the-
mind doing that
The,
if you
the
didn't
best
mind
example being
severing
Emma
it and make a
Vigeland when she went
statement.
on Tim Pool.
But there's
Right.
also issues about getting if you want to come back on. I don't think Critical Drinker is going to go back on Russell Brand. It was probably definitely something they thought was an opportunity. And just for the record, Russell Brand is one of these weird conspiracy-minded leftists like Jimmy Dore. Okay, they're still on the left, so a little strange. But yeah, but I think we covered that issue.
Or the more
I
recent
definitely did
counterfactual.
want to actually hit up that point. Yeah, he did say he would probably go on Russell Brand, but would he act the same and not push back at all? Would he push back
that
as
would
much
remain
as
to be seen.
Destiny on Russell Brand? No, but
No. I'm just kind of talking about. I guess I'm kind of talking about the realities of
yeah,
going onto someone else's platform, especially a significantly larger platform than your own.
yeah, different people will have different reasons for going on. If you're going to invite someone like Ethan Ralph on, you don't expect something to be civil. You expect it to be chaos. Depends on who it is, what you want from the content you're going for. And Russell Brand definitely does have that sort of air of echo chamber to it, which Mauler, which we're probably not going to get to at this rate, but I'm just playing the video to sort of highlight some points. We can skip through some. Let's see if there's anything else with this that spurs any conversation within us.
And I get a run here.
So you just
in a
mentioned
few
this
minutes.
a friend of a friend or whatever that has a lot of sort of conspiracy brain sort of things, but also happens to watch Critical Drinker. Do you think that's a fair thing to bring up before we've seen anything to do with Drinker yet?
I mean, if I was trying to present it as anything other than just an anecdotal experience, but I didn't. I made it pretty clear, and I even used the word anecdotal. And I mean, it's more about going through the video. And
you did say that it stuck with you. That
yeah, because that's a very bizarre thing to hear from someone.
Well, but did you
I
ask?
was like,
Is it?
they
What
didn't even
other
know about
YouTubers
your
they
channel.
watch?
I thought that they would have known about your shit because you're like associated with.
But like,
it.
if he did,
They didn't even know about your stuff.
if he did, I doubt you'd say at the beginning of checking out my channel, like, by the way, there's a friend of a friend who knows about conspiracy shit that watches Mauler. It's like, okay.
Well, no, but I mean, because if he did, it would be through Critical Drinker.
Maybe.
But I guess you're saying hypothetically, if he brought you up, I mean, like that would give me something to think about. I'm not sure I would come away with the same, like, I'm not going to say conclusion because I didn't really make a conclusion, but same preconceived notion.
Yeah, I like this clarification. It definitely is a good point for Mauler to bring up to confront YMS on this particular point. No problems here.
Well, you could say that there is definitely different expectations in terms of I guess, like, I don't think YMS's initial impressions are at all like super unreasonable or like irrational, because they are, just as he admits, impressions, you know. And Drinker definitely has a more kind of anti woke, more kind of center right leaning appeal. So if you have like a crazy like far right wing nut, and all you've heard is, oh yeah, the Critical Drinker is kind of right leaning, and then the wing nut friend that you know is like, oh yeah, I watched this guy. It's like, yeah, that could mean something, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me take the poison the well route here. You know, I'm well known for my bad faith antics. Let me pose this question: why did Mauler, because they're friends with YMS, I don't think Critical Drinker even notice this or even care about it at all? If he did, was this something of Mauler saw and he wanted to invite him on? Why not even
yeah, I think they explicitly say at the end of the stream, right? Like, oh yeah, you know, we're invested in both you and Drinker as content creators, and we just, you know, we thought that you two would be like, we prefer there not be bad blood between the two of you.
Yeah, and I just don't know why a conversation didn't go on afterwards, just because YMS, there's just so much background stuff that annoys me. Lack of transparency of EFAP definitely is annoying.
Yeah, they definitely tend to keep they tend to keep beefs that are close to home a little bit more behind the scenes.
And when people leak stuff, they can turn into a certain way. It's just annoying that the narrative can get set by someone who's more transparent, but they could be completely dishonest because of the policy of not EFAP, not really being private, sort of going into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sorry, what were we talking about before that?
No, I was just commending YMS for acknowledging his own double bias here, that if you apply, because he knows Mauler, Of course,
I mean,
in his
wouldn't-
particular.
yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay. The jab device not connected. Maybe his mic got off. What were you going to say, Layden?
But you were talking about YMS and like him taking responsibility for his political bias, and it's like, well, I mean, doesn't he sort of have to take responsibility for his political bias, given that I think the context for taking this thing politically is pretty much because of him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, what with YMS, just to clarify?
Yeah, with YMS, yeah, I feel like this whole thing wouldn't have been viewed as like you could. I feel like if EFAP had gone over this this interview with Russell Brand, they would have like kind of left out the political bits and kind of focused on more of like whatever, like the core of what he's saying. But I feel like the reason this got blown up, the reason this became something on people's radars is because YMS kind of took a political slant against it whenever there wasn't overtly one already there.
Okay, I can understand where you're coming from here. Fundamentally, I think I have personal issues, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree.
I think I
Not
disagree with that. Sorry.
Okay, disagree
Go
with
ahead.
that. Go ahead. And cut out again. Shit.
Oh,
Jab,
no.
your might is you went dead again. Maybe he'll fix it. But what I was going to get into is sort of when you go into something that has a EFAP is going into this non-politically and saying
Trying to.
YMS is talking about the politics of it and not engaging with your personal politics. See, it's a weird sort of
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear
yes,
you, bro.
we can hear you now.
Okay. Hey,
But yeah, it's sort of a weird beast to sort of go in, like, why are you conflating critical drinkers politics with Russell Brand and just being like, we're non-political. It almost comes off as Mauler's trying to cover critical drinkers' ass. Does that you get any what of a feeling trying to keep him out of the sort of right conspiracy theory that maybe YMS's sort of criticism of him might place him in certain people's minds? A lot of these people already have a bias that critical drinker is a far right person.
I don't know if I like the phrasing "cover drinker's ass" as much as I would maybe say
Defending a friend or trying
elucidate,
to
elucidate his position, maybe
elucidate his position and even steel man in his position at certain points while acknowledging he's not sure. He
because I'm
tries
sure
to
Mauler, as someone who feels he's very closely knit with Drinker, feels like he can properly represent his perspective.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit weak. Some of his steel manning of the critical drinker talking on subject because of maybe he does have some insight to critical drinker because they do have a podcast together, but the weird sort of connections that go on just gives me bad. It just comes off a little bit weird, like defendant. As I said, I have issues with Mauler, like with the sort of what was it? Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think the reason why he got so much flack is because he was trying to defend Rags as a critique of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and they sort of misrepresented that with their sort of debate with Literature Devil. That was just a whole mess. But I'm poisoning the well with outside sources.
Wow, what an asshole.
I am
sorry, before we get back into it, my mic is being really finicky and I've got to go in a few minutes anyway. I think I'll just dip now.
Okay, man. It was good to have you on for as long as I did.
Sorry for
I don't
talking
want to
way
rush
too
you or
much.
anything. I don't want to push you out or anything or like say you don't have to go right now. But I'd be curious, like what was it that you disagreed about with the YMS and his that disagreement that you had?
What were we talking about at that specific time? I was distracted trying to get my mic back up.
YMS is political. YMS making it political. Yeah.
I think you were saying that you almost were saying he unwarrantingly brought sort of a political slant to the discussion or his critiques of Drinker.
Or that he initiated the political discussion. Yeah.
Well,
Therefore, that was reason for him to justify himself as
you think
political.
that you said earlier in this discussion that Drinker is political, right?
Yes.
At least in the sense that he kind of views things through more of a socio-cultural lens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I think then that naturally sort of invites political discussion.
Yeah, it does. Like it does invite political discussion, but maybe it's like if he, I feel like he wanted it to be more political than perhaps it was all along, right? Yeah, like it does invite political discussion, but just because you can have political discussion doesn't necessarily mean you should. And I feel like whenever he's dealing with like,
Well,
especially a
the
large
criticism
creator-
was specifically he initiated it, right?
yeah,
just by going on Russell Brand, it's sort of he's going to put that idea in his audience's mind and Russell Brand's eye that he's more connected to the more political nature of it. So maybe fairly or unfairly.
I would actually disagree. I feel like him going on Russell Brand doesn't actually mean anything politically, but YMS.
Yeah, but from YMS's perspective.
YMS focusing on the interview instead of, say, his original content, that does have a political slant, right? For sure.
Yeah, I can't necessarily disagree with that entirely, but
well, I like to say, yeah, well, he's focusing on this thing that is political, therefore he's bringing in the political slant. It's like, is he though?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if he had focused on something that wasn't the Russell Brand interview, perhaps he wouldn't have had to bring politics into it as much. I would have been very interested to see just him actually review his original content and what he.
I mean, I think that definitely is.
Yeah, I definitely
much
think that
better
this is
way of taking him as a critic. But yeah, YMS.
Yeah, because it's like, I think as Mauler says, sorry to interrupt again, but like Mauler,
okay.
Mauler says,
sorry.
No, you're fine. Like Mauler says, this is a very kind of fairly brief interview, where like it's more formal because it's like a really big star Russell Brand interviewing Drinker, where Drinker isn't going to have time to have the most fleshed out and nuanced opinions. So I think that you're definitely right. This isn't a great place to this isn't a great place to get like a holistic view of Drinker's like thoughts and methodology and stuff like that.
Yeah. And about the sort of conspiracy brained anti-vax, Russell Brand is very anti-vax. So saying him sort of bringing that up might actually be related with this. Is it the best way to introduce his audience to the critical Drinker as a critic? No, but as a sort of a politically charged reviewer, which he is part of the review community, he does have a slight point there. I can see both sides of that particular issue there. It's very complex.
I definitely agree with you in the respect that he could have looked at something that's a little bit more properly representative of Drinker.
Yeah, it's like if YMS had gone on to an interview with I don't know who's like a left wing person, like if YMS had gone on to an interview with Vosh or something, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, YMS. I know YMS has spoken to Vosh a number of times. Like,
and I've seen that in the comments.
Yeah, they've been on. What was it? It was the Drunken Peasants. I think they were on together a number of times. It's like I don't know the nature of those podcasts. I haven't seen them, but if like YMS is more kind of politically left leaning, if he were to go on and be kind of buddy with Vosh, right, or like an interview, like Jay's been interviewed by Vosh during the whole React Gate thing,
And
like
did they talk about politics? The detail does matter when you bring up these associations.
well, I
And
mean,
yeah,
it's like like if I guess like the same thing could be said about YMS. Like someone's like, oh hey, do you know YMS? Or you have like an insane like Vosh fan who's like an absolute far out there like left like what was it, a narco syndicalist is what Vosh describes himself as, like someone like that, and they say, oh yeah, my favorite movie reviewer is YMS. It's like okay,
And then it's
yeah,
like
maybe.
if Critical Drinker locked onto that and then was like, well, it's like I heard some crazy shit about this guy YMS, and well, let's watch an interview of him on this with Bosch. It would be like, well,
Yeah, it could definitely kind of paint a picture. So I think although I will say YMS doesn't have the same sort of political bend as Drinker does. So it's a little different, but I can understand how it could lead people to certain conclusions.
Yeah, it's all about the fairness of it. Yeah.
yeah,
Which again goes back to probably the main issue being this was a lot of this was off the cuff, admittedly so, by YMS.
As
And
the very
it
beginning,
was like kind of rushed together, like right before he was like the day before he was supposed to get on a flight to go wherever. So
yeah, you're responsible not doing proper research. And he does admit a lot of his issues within the stream, but as you said, you need to go. Let me not.
That's something I do give YMS a lot of credit for. He does walk back a good number of things.
Yeah, it's good to have that clarification. I don't know if he ever put this up on his channel though, which he talks about. Maybe
I don't think he did because of the reaction this episode of EFAP got.
Yeah, a lot of people let the sort of insaneness of. Before you go, what do you think about the insaneness of just EFAP's sort of community and culture and audience? Because I think it's not a large majority. I would say 10. I don't even want to put a number, but there is a very vocal percentage of their audience who completely swamps these creators. And I cut out that part in the beginning. He goes over that.
I guess I'll say, like, in terms of brigading, obviously it's probably not good. It's probably not something you should do. But in terms of like online harassment, it's like the lowest tier of that. As long like they're not from everything I know, they're not doxing people. They're not sending them death threats.
Okay.
At worst, I guess you kind of get them being mean in like
false flagging,
subreddits or like getting mean or defensive in other people's comment sections, which EFAP do condone, but maybe they either don't condone it enough or their condemnation isn't enough to do anything about it because, like I said, they do have kind of a hands-off approach when addressing their audience.
Yeah, and I have issues both ways on that. It's a really weird
it's not
dynamic.
an easy discussion, but considering how much of a Destiny fanboy that Mauler is, you'd think that maybe he would be a little bit more hands-on because Destiny tends to be very hands-on with how he approaches policing his community.
Yeah, it does seem a little odd, the sort of and definitely
but doesn't mean they have to agree with everything on everything.
No,
just that it's not an easy discussion to have because it plays into like people's intentions and like, okay, well, I mean, how much of someone else's actions are you responsible for just because maybe you had some influence on them?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a weird sort of discussion.
Yeah, it's not an easy discussion to have, but there are clear examples of like, okay, if you're doxing people, you should probably ban that person from your community, right?
Yeah,
or if they're like sending death threats or something like that.
Yep, all the sort of things that break liberal principles. Okay, there is a certain line.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to discuss, but you know, it's still worthy of discussion, I think. Anyway, it was a lovely chat, boys. Thank you for having me on. Good talking to you again, Vincent. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was nice to have you back on. Maybe I'll bug you in a few more months to do something. I'm always jumping topic to topic. And I would say plug yourself, but I don't think
really
you have
any stuff at the moment. Probably won't for a while longer still, if ever. But
thanks for talking, buddy.
Bye, guys.
Been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed the discussion. Bye now.
Next time, bro.
So now it's just us content creators, the scrub who doesn't create any videos at all. No,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put myself above anyone who doesn't create content because they're actually doing something with their life. Not that I'm not doing anything with my life or implying you're not doing anything with your life. But, you know, it's good to get different perspectives. And both me and
agree.
you probably have you stream a lot more than me. I don't even know if I would want to stream as much as you. But
You probably don't. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, let's continue. Probably gonna try to cap it. How does an hour sound at max? Half hour to hour?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, that should be good.
Okay, Jab has a lot of insight, but like a lot of people I know, he can go really into things, and I don't really help things out. So I'll just press play.
But I guess I'm trying to.
Control.
Could you see someone reviewing your channel and just starting up the review with like, I know someone who's essentially kind of crazy who watches YMS, and that's always stuck with me.
I mean, if my content was frequently criticized for being like really culture war-y kind of sort of thing, like whether or not we're going to say like Critical Drinkers content is that, like it aligns with like a larger public perception, right? So that's why it's relevant for me to bring up.
If is the thing, if the content in Critical Drinkers videos was just one-to-one with everything that friend believed, and then you showed that would be, you'd nail it. Obviously the problem is that there are things people say about all of us here, and if you open your video with that or an anecdotal experience that matches that,
Yeah, we shouldn't treat it like that was my like opening statement of like a thesis though. Like we should, like, I'm just, again, I was just saying what I knew of Critical Drinker and my own personal anecdotal experiences I've had, saying that I clicked on a couple videos that some people in the subreddit were mad about him, and it would be, yeah, I felt like that was worthy of mentioning, especially with the frequent caveats and clarifications that I make.
Yeah, he goes on and on about that. I'm sure you know that.
A combination of my audience and two other people's audience.
To give you an example, if
the highlight video, the number one is like this. Here's an unbiased summary for people that didn't have the time, and it's like a very fair representative sample of my audience, is that me, and as you can see through that stream and as you can see through this conversation, the type of thoughts that I put out into the world are ones where I'm constantly encouraging trying to understand other people, trying to be fair, and trying to, even if I have biases, saying those biases, recognizing those biases, and seeing if being open to having those biases contradicted, or being open to new information even if I have a preconceived idea about somebody else. I feel like that is more representative of my audience singularly. Let's think about this for a second too.
Oh,
Even
God.
with a lot of people,
He really just goes on and on about it.
Yeah, he says he's trying to be like good faith and everything. Yeah, he's trying to. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
feel
when
like
you
maybe
keep
right
re-
now he needs to make beep beep sounds because he sounds like he's.
it's
backpedaling.
definitely optical failing when you try to defend definitely something. I mean, he absolutely has a point, but optically him going on and on about it is definitely gonna, like, is this guy just trying to gaslight us or something? Which I don't think he's doing. He's just really not used to this sort of
He's not
forum.
used to.
Well,
Yeah,
he
he's not.
should-
He's not
he
used to
should
having
be. He's on
pushbacks. Probably.
Sardonicast. He's on Sardonicast, okay, which is not something I engage in because I don't really have respect for either of his partners. I have a little, like, what, it's Ralph the movie critic and I
never
Hate
watched.
Everything.
I've never watched. I know who I Hate Everything is, but no, I've never watched Sardonicast.
Yeah, I think I tried. It's not for me. Okay, I'm not going to say it's bad. It's just
Not for you.
yeah, it's not for me. What he's saying, I can understand why it would come off as sort of him sort of going on, and yeah, maybe he's just befuddled by this. I don't know if it's Mauler sort of coming at him or if he's sort of reading too much in the chat. Like, there's a lot of issues with conflating the audience capture and audience perception, sort of confusing the two. You don't know if he's reacting to sort of Mauler bringing this up. What's your thoughts on that? I'm getting a little conspiracy minded myself.
If you mean like what his fans are reacting to?
Just YMS going on and on.
I think right now it's in that moment where it's kind of like if you ever watch those police interrogation videos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good comparison.
It's like the guy has said way too much, you know, and you know, maybe now that the police have now revealed more of the information they have on hand, he's maybe going, okay, let me just backtrack over all this stuff I just said and make sure that this all fits correctly in the public lens. I feel like it's one of those moments, or at least that's how it seems. I feel like that's why he's focused. I feel like that's why he's hyper focusing on it, right? It's like,
Okay.
oof, it's like I might look really bad because of some things, because of all the context being applied to the things I said. And so he's sort of overcorrecting. That's how it comes.
Yeah. I mean, I understand why this would come off to people's audience as the sort of gaslighting, but I think he's just like, am I saying this correctly? Am I communicating this? I thought I communicated in my video, but apparently it seems like Mauler and maybe his audience, his friends don't feel like I gave the proper context beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. He's seeing the water leaking in his ship, and he's going, "Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit!" And he's trying to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
That's how it feels, at least. I don't know.
Yeah, the vibe check thing. What he's saying, there's nothing literally wrong. It's just sort of how he's going on and rambling about it, I think is really not smart. But he's not used to this sort of confrontation.
Yeah, whenever you're in an interrogation and you know, the first thing you do is shut the fuck up, get a lawyer. Right?
Well, I'm glad he goes on, even if some people get a bad impression of this, because he does clarify. And a lot of I've seen a lot of comments him walking back a lot of things. He just that sort of his sort of thoughts on that aren't that deep. Because I can sympathize with YMS because I'm the type of person who can get out of a fandom easily. I just abandon fandoms and try to find something new, but I can understand people cannot. Other people of different perspectives, they put so much time investment into it. They don't just want to abandon it. They want to sort of take it back, and that's sort of the sort of mindset of a lot of Mauler and a lot of EFAP in general, opposed to someone like YMS. Be like, this stuff is shit. Okay, just abandon and go to movie festivals where you're getting indie artists.
No, it's like I think there's a really sound point to be made there, and it's like I'm sure if we go deeper into this, but we'll get to the point where they're talking about like how, yeah, it's good that you have, you know, a love for movies, things like that, but I consider myself to be a part of the fandom menace, right? Because I think that there is value to be had, like Andor, right? There's value to be had in things that can in franchises, properties that are big still, and it's perhaps in the critique of those things that we can see more of those good things. So I do believe in critique in that way. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely agree with critique in that way for even the things I like or I see potential in. And you get the little hint of hope with something like Endor, and then you get Ahsoka. And why I did Steelman it and argued for it before, that's just for the sake that it wasn't as bad as Obi-Wan. That Obi-Wan was just so horrible, and a lot of other stuff. But
yeah, it's very difficult to gradiate things with rank, like because you might just end up saying like, you know, it's like it's the best of a bad thing. It's like, well,
yeah,
what are we really saying ultimately?
Yeah, it's the back to the black and white thinking that I can't really stand. Get into the details. Where is it good? Where is it bad? When you just go so one-sided on something, which definitely is something more from the EFAP perspective, they'll just shit because both overall it's crap, and they find it fun just to shit on something like that in general.
Yeah, I agree with you.
As a content style, I can't disagree with it. I just don't think it's very constructive and helpful for the overline community and creating bridges. I do, as I said, I like the fact that he's talking to Star Wars theory, But Star Wars Theory has a horrible reputation himself. I don't know if it's going to help him, but don't know how that's going to turn out.
But, like, I think that's like the overall point. It's like you should probably try to talk to as many people as you can. That's
Yes.
why it's very toxic to bring politics into things like this, right? It's
but
really
you have to acknowledge I think you have to at least acknowledge the politics, even if you don't want to personally comment on it. Just say there is politics within Critical Drinkers content, both inherent from the cultural war side, but there's also a sort of a critical aspect to, of course, the Critical Drinker that some people like Pillar of Garbage sort of mischaracterize. And YMS's perception, if someone of Pillar of Garbage saw YMS's sort of look at that, yes, they'll have a certain bias towards it, but he'll open them up to different perspectives, opposed to someone who's just like, Critical Drinker's lying about this because of blah, blah, blah. Just go in black and white thinking again, opposed to what YMS is trying to do here. And yeah, very sloppily not doing his research, but trying to open people to the subjective. This is back to the subjective, objective argument. Really comes back to that sort of mindset, and people misunderstanding both those on both sides personally. But yes, big old ranch. Sorry to put you through that
frame of mind going into it, so that if I say
Back
something
to the
potentially
food
unfair, or if I
and-
have direction that my mind is going, that it could be influenced by something like an anecdotal experience that I had with someone. And I want that information to be out there so that if, let's say, something happens in my brain where I'm being
what it argues. And so
Eh,
we say, I've heard a lot of negative things about the channel and what it gets up to, what it argues. And so today we're going to check out something he says, see what happens.
well, I mean, based on your issues with what I'm saying, I don't know how it's any better to just be vague about it. Like,
Because
if your
when
issue
you-
is that I said something negative before
Sure,
I started the stream, I don't know how it's better to be vague.
If you talk about someone who believes in like crazy shit and then says that they're a fan of Drinker, the connection is that Drinker supports the crazy shit.
No, because I made very clear to make clarifications in my stream that that's not what I was saying.
So you brought it up just as a random connect. It has nothing. That isn't the connection you're trying to
I
draw.
didn't say random. I explained 2 sentences ago why I brought it up. It's for context, so that people have more information before going into it.
yeah, I can see why YMS is frustrated with this line. He went on this whole spiel, and Mauler is just asking about this and sort of advocating for him to leave, not explain his sort of bias here.
So I mean,
I do agree with Mauler. That's the more honest way of going into this. But frankly, I just think it's not very accepting of what YMS is arguing here. I think Mauler should be going and be like, yes, I completely understand your argument. I'm just saying my issue with that is this inherited thing, and wouldn't it still be better? I think it would be a lot shorter if he would have acknowledged what YMS was talking about, instead of sort of alluding that I don't care about what you just spat out there. Do you get that feeling that YMS feels this way in this moment, that Mauler isn't listening to him? He's just sort of moving past what he just said and moving to a completely different point? Because that's my feeling of that's how YMS is feeling. Is it the actual reality?
I
That's
actually
totally
feel the
different thing.
opposite. I feel like YMS is wanting him to go on because he doesn't like the spotlight where it's at. Like
Okay, he doesn't like the stuff that Mauler is implying here about him. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like, because I mean, wouldn't you want to just address it like straight on if you could?
Address what Mauler's saying here instead of sort of this sort of a weird verbal deflection that's going on here.
That's how. Go ahead and play it over again.
Okay.
Let's hear it again.
Yeah, let's listen to it again, because this is a important part here, I think, and I sort of skipped it. Let's go back. God, that I shouldn't have been lazy and edited this down much better.
Something happens in my brain where I'm being led by that belief in a certain way, or led by like, if I wouldn't want to start the video being like, I have no thoughts about critical drinker. I haven't heard anything about them. Like, I wouldn't want to like pretend like I'm a completely neutral subject. I think that it makes more sense and it's more fair to share my biases before starting a video.
So is it not possible to simply say, I've heard a lot of negative things about the channel and what it gets up to, what it argues, and so today we're going to check out something he says, see what happens?
Well, I mean, based on your issues with what I'm saying, I don't know how it's any better to just be vague about it. Like,
Because
if your
when
issue
you-
is that I said something negative before
Sure,
I started the stream, I don't know how it's better to be vague.
If you talk about someone who believes in like crazy shit and then says that they're a fan of Drinker, the connection is that Drinker supports the crazy shit.
No, because I made very clear to make clarifications in my stream that that's not what I was saying.
So you brought it up just as a random connect. It has nothing. That isn't the connection you're trying to
I
draw.
didn't say random. I explained 2 sentences ago. Why.
Yeah, like that right there. That feels like what I was talking about, where you have the interrogation, and it's like, well, okay, well, here's some more information that's come out. It's like, okay, well, let me just back this up a little bit. That's how I feel like YMS is reacting to that.
Yeah, I definitely get a feeling of that. He feels like he's not being heard by Mauler in this moment. Okay. In that, I think it just could have just been clarified, be like, yes, I understand your personal perspective on that, but consider outside audience how they would, if let's say if this was clipped out of context or something like that, which might be part of what Mauler is sort of getting at here. Someone leaving all this stuff off. And that is a valid concern to have. But I don't think Mauler is going into the inherent problems with what YMS, because YMS did make it clear. He feels like it's being dishonest if he doesn't disclose his bias or transparency beforehand. This is a difference between being more transparent with your opinions and clearly state that you have this certain bias. You don't have that great of a grasp of it. And maybe Mauler thinks it's very irresponsible for YMS to actually do a stream like that. But as Jab brought up earlier, it's almost more of a criticism of blind streaming culture, which is widely accepted. And yeah, EFAP really fights against that. And you see, you notice how I edited this stream down, probably not as good as I should have, and got you guys all a chance. This is from your video, and I gave Jab a edited copy of this. I believe in going into with the research beforehand, but I don't like the idea that I have to force my perspective on how content and streaming should be created on other people. And if I was to criticize them based on that, I would be like, I understand why you did what you did, but I think it's unethical or irresponsible to do it that way, given the association. Maybe people take your clips out of context. And he would probably say, like, well, that's just them being dishonest or not acknowledging what I said beforehand. But any thoughts on that bloviated rant I went on?
Well, if I say, like, so Vincent Martin, we're gonna watch this video by Vincent Martin, and he has it's this take or that take. I don't know. He thinks the Rings of Power is like a really good show, right? But it's like, but Vincent Martin also, like, I know this guy who likes Vincent Martin, and he's like a hardcore SJW, right? Like, I think what Mauler's talking about, it's the unfairness of that.
Yes,
statement.
and I do agree with Mauler's general point here, but the way this is sort of you brought it up. This is an interrogation, and definitely there is a lot of miscommunication between these two at this moment. I think we can both agree on that. We might not agree on the exact details of that, but yeah.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I brought it up. It's for context so that people have more information before going into it.
But sorry, so you wanted to bring up that he is a person who believes in like crazy stuff and that he watches The Drinker, but that those two facts are not connected.
Yeah, I don't like Mauler keep repeating this. Okay. I mean, I understand why he's doing it. He wants YMS to acknowledge this.
Yeah,
And YMS is just going to repeat himself, okay? He's like, yeah, I gave the proper context beforehand to say that this is I'm disclosing my bias, and this is my personal thing.
So if I said I here we're gonna watch this Vincent Martin video, but here I know this hardcore SJW, and they make the most.
I am understanding your point, and I genuinely agree with it.
But if I say like that individual that hardcore SJW person makes the most insane arguments, and they're big fans of Vincent Martin, versus me just saying, well, here's Vincent Martin, and here's I've heard some wild things, and I just want to check this out, right? Like there is a big difference, but it's not.
Yeah, there is. You are.
I feel like whenever we say expressing our bias, we're talking about more the second example than the first. The first example isn't really expressing your bias. The first example is me
expressing the bias of this crazy person. Yeah, I can see why this coming across as poisoning the well for some people, but it's just about the matter of mindset that. And I do hope YMS does take this in consideration in the future, even if he's off put by this, and takes this criticism seriously, because I think it is important here to address it, to sort of be like, I'm not saying anything with this. I just know some guy, he could be a little bit more vague with this, not going into the details. Completely agree. Just my perception is, I know someone, yeah, no, he has those crazy beliefs, and that's the only reviewer on YouTube that he knows about is Critical Drinker. I just find that weird. But the amount of time YMS he just talks himself into sort of stupid points, I think. But yes, I do agree. The
foundation was sort of laid on stupid points. Yeah. It's like what one person believes this about this person, therefore, it's like I'm not saying anything about that, but it's always stuck with me that this one person thinks this about this person. It's like, well, shit.
I agree that can be read by a lot of people, but maybe YMS has too much faith in his audience and doesn't expect people outside his audience to come in and misread sort of what he's characterizing this as. Maybe he just has too much faith in his audience here. That could be the case, and thinking he's clear enough with this when there's people with more. I think the term, maybe he's being very naive here and thinking that people are inherently good and they won't sort of think that he's trying to mischaracterize Critical Drinker by bringing this up. Just being a whole crazy thing. Not even thinking about it. Very irresponsible in my personal opinion, but yeah, you understand what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That YMS,
it would be to assume that his viewers perhaps have like the same level of maturity as he does on these things.
Yeah, which is definitely stupid from a content creator perspective, but acknowledging that YMS believe, I can't even say for sure that this isn't just Cope and him post hoc rationalizing his take, but my reading is that he's sort of doing that here, and he wants to believe his audience. If I'm being a good faith reading of this, he wants to believe his audience is. Sorry, I got a message from Jap, but yeah, I think I generally made my point, and I'm glad you understood it. And I just want to make it clear that I understood your point. You believe.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, you understand. We can rock on.
Okay. I understand you. You understand me. I'm trying to make sure good communication's going on, even if it isn't the greatest content in the world.
I'll stop you.
That's my anecdotal experience. Is that there's people that exist in his audience, at least one, right? That are conspiracy brained and have somehow
he's
found
himself a hole.
His channel was because he was doing like a lot of like COVID conspiracy shit and stuff that wasn't allowed on YouTube. And he kind of Russell Brand in my opinion, very consciously plays into.
I also think YMS is letting his sort of very unnaked biased against Russell Brand, let him color critical drinker coming onto his podcast. Would you say that might be something that YMS isn't really getting into, or they don't really get into? I don't think.
Wait, repeat that. You said his uncolored opinion on what?
On Russell Brand, his very negative opinion on Russell Brand, color critical drinkers character in a really bad light.
I I wouldn't want to say he's relying on that, but I feel like by fact, perhaps by his own unconscious political bias, he's fallen into that because there's probably no worse way to understand, an individual than by a conversation with someone who shares their political bias.
Yeah. Well, in psychology, it's transference. There's something called transference. Okay. If you have bad feelings for someone and they're closely, it's almost guilt by association. And I'm not saying that's what YMS is doing here, but they're definitely, maybe he's just stuck in the leftist culture where that's just a given. That's a part of his YMS's bias, is that he's letting the fact that critical drinker would go on and not push back against. Well, he does it from the start, so maybe I can admit there might be a sense of dishonesty from the start and a framing from the start based on that. But I don't like reading intent too much on that. But I'll give that point some credence there. Would you say that's fair or no?
I'd say that's fair.
Okay. Yeah, I just going through this again. Sometimes going through something over and over again, you start seeing new things, especially after you duke it out verbally and discuss some of the nitty gritty of it.
His own audience capture and knows what people want to hear and is essentially just grifting, making money off of doing that, right? And I'm not saying that that's what Critical Drinker is doing, and I make very clear in my stream that that's not what I'm saying. So my bringing up the conspiracy person that I had a face-to-face conversation with in my life.
Yeah, just going on and on.
My bringing up,
and then
we're
this-
going to have to agree to disagree.
I think you said it entirely
And then
non-maliciously,
he just
just
began-
casually.
I actually, how do you think this could be resolved? Okay, because this really is a roadblock in their conversation, and it's mainly on YMS's part, not really acknowledging Mauler's sort of points here. Yeah.
How do I think it can be resolved?
Yeah, how instead of agree to disagree, they just fundamentally disagree. And do you think Mauler is being more accommodating to YMS? I think they're both being rather stubborn with their points and not letting up and not finding a middle ground.
So this might be my biases coming into play, but I feel like whenever Mahler's looking at this, he's talking about purely, it's like, well, let's take everything else equal. Let's take out the political bias, and let's look at what the content of what the person's actually saying. Versus, I feel like YMS's main points revolve around, okay, let's look at the political bias and then take everything else through the filter of that. So everything he says about modern strong females, and then comparing them to Ripley from Alien, it's like, well, let's look at that through a political lens, versus, well, let's look at that through a writing lens. I feel like somewhere along the beginning of this, and again, it's like I feel like this all comes back to how YMS approached this whole thing by choosing the Russell Brand interview. It's we're going to end up looking more at the political things than we are about the other things, which the other things are what's actually of interest. Just like if we were to look at the Sardanova cast or whatever it is, like podcast with YMS with people who may share his political biases, well, we're not actually looking at what we're not actually looking at the critique of film. We're more looking through the lens of political bias, maybe.
Okay, fair enough. I think YMS, you're basically saying YMS should be looking at Critical Drinker from a reviewer perspective. Why he's looking at it mainly from a sort of political implications here. And that's
Yes.
sort of Mauler's point is that, but in YMS's favor is I don't think he thinks those two things can be sort of separated. It can just be something that has to be stated, one's bias going in to know how that sort of affects the sort of commentary or review that he's going to have on a particular subject matter. And I do agree. And by Mauler trying to take politics out of it, he's just
Well, wait. So wait, you think someone's bias would have an effect on how well they can review something critically?
well, take out the sort of robot example of Mauler. That's sort of if someone wants to sort of take out their political bias and not make that known to a certain sort of crowd, probably mostly on the left, probably even some people on the right, they'll find that a little suspicious how you want to take not even mention anything about the politics or anything like that. So taking the politics out of that just is going to come off as weird, maybe disingenuous. And this is frankly just a steel man, which I think has some merit to it. It's just about a sort of a cognitive dissonance between in YMS here, due to a number of factors, as you said, the sort of interrogation style that he's feeling, even though I think Mauler is handling this not great, but to a good extent, he's coming at it rather well. He's just not acknowledging the only thing he's not acknowledging his point and trying to walk him back to a point about the bringing up the. I don't think maybe he should just go for the throat in this sort of civility and trying to walk around this.
But to go for the throat would be to do the opposite of the thing of what YMS did, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm just sometimes you want to cut through the bullshit, and I think that would have been a better approach for Mauler now that we're in this. But
I think to go for the throat would be to enforce your political bias.
Okay, probably use the wrong terminology. I'd like to use a very negative, more go directly to the point instead of let's play this. Let's see how Mauler reacts to this. Watch this before, but let's get the play-by-play.
I just think that strategically speaking, it's not fair to Drinker. That's what I think.
Okay. That was the cut. Not fair to Drinker. And I think that's pretty much the end of that. I think he should have been a little bit more direct about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. But that is my feeling that he should have been a little bit more direct in that his sort of approach instead of putting in the soft language that Mauler's definitely trying to be very diplomatic with YMS here. And I think he does sort of press YMS later on. But in the early parts of it, I think being direct and giving a little more pushback, as I said, going for the throat probably is a hyper exaggeration, but more direct with this, acknowledge what he's saying and be more direct against YMS here with what he's saying and sort of get into the idea of it, sort of thinking about it just in a moment.
What do you mean by the idea of it?
Just as you said, you used when you take, it sounds like YMS is taking a personal example. It feels like he's being attacked in this moment. Okay. If you gave a hypothetical of someone else, I think would be a better approach to Mauler could have taken to sort of explain this concept to YMS here. And I think he does do that. He sort of does that with himself. Like, what if you did the same thing with Critical Drinker? Would you do the same with me? It's very personal. If you sometimes take yourself out and use a hypothetical person and put them in the same scenario and ask YMS about that hypothetical example you came up with, you take out the sort of personal attack element. And even if you replicate it rather well, maybe, as I said, in the moment thing, what's your thoughts on that? That could have been a better approach there.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a better example if you take out like the personal attacks, but at the same time, it's like I don't feel like personal attacks were really what was going on there, right?
It
It's
doesn't
like
matter what you or I or the audience. It's a matter of what YMS. And I'm not criticizing Mauler for this in particular. I'm just, in retrospect, going over this, thinking about this, I'm thinking it would have been a better approach that could have had YMS be less defensive if Mauler took that approach. That's simply all I'm saying there.
yeah, I agree. He would have been less defensive had he taken that approach. But I think the intended thing is to, yeah, so it's like be as defensive as you want.
Yeah, it's gonna make, and I understand why it makes YMS come off as bad faith and all this stuff here. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, but because at heart, and again, this is all comes down to like personal opinion, but at heart, I feel like that there is an element of bad faith, right? There is an element of it in that it's like, well, if I said, you know, here's this crazy social justice warrior, he listens to Vincent Martin, that, you know, it's like, I'm not going to let that affect the rest of my opinions. But anyway, let's go on with our video about Vincent Martin. It's like, well, if you watch that, you would think, well, geez, Leighton is kind of being bad faith, right? It's like, and
different people would take it different ways. If you used it as a joke, different perspectives of the audience would take it. Yes, a lot of audience would definitely be colored by that sort of quick commentary before you moved into
especially if I had a majority conservative audience.
Yeah. And YMS, I think, is trying to be very open with other people's bias. He doesn't understand how other audiences will perceive him, sort of the sort of sensitive nature of our cancel culture. I don't think he's taken that seriously enough. He's probably someone who doesn't take cancel culture seriously enough. This is the problem with actually not addressing and not getting into the sort of culture aspect and just being focused on the criticism, which YMS is doing this weird balancing act here, which is annoying.
Well, I waited like a long time before I even made my Lion King review. Like my stance on the Lion King 2019 was don't watch it, don't even watch it ironically, stop asking me to see it, don't give them money, because like I fucking care about, you know, the Lion King is like one of my favorite movies ever. And I love the original so much, and I didn't want to incentivize Disney to make more.
I think I need to give context because I cut it. Basically, they're trying to get him to understand why people keep defending Star Wars and keep vehemently do it, and his particular stance here. So, some context for this.
And my suggestion for people not to do that didn't make a fucking difference. It made $1 billion right away. It became the most the highest grossing animated film of all time, only to be beaten by the Mario movie this year.
Why do you think, do you think there's a reason why Disney films aren't making as much money anymore compared to 4 or 5 years ago, where like they were, you know, dominating 6, 7, 8 out of the top 10 highest grossing films of all time? What do you think changed?
Fatigue. People are seeing more of the same shit. It's not art anymore. You're not showing people a new experience. I think that there's enough people that, like, if you polled people coming out of the fucking theater, like which is what CinemaScore does, which, you know, I don't think that they're like a great website in terms of how to find good movies.
Use a bathroom.
First people who watch like a huge variety of films and have seen so many that it's already like, okay, you're kind of doing the same thing again already. You know, if they've seen it once or twice, then, you know, there's a certain portion of the population that's going to be like, okay, come off it. The first one that I tried watching, trying to replicate lightning in a bottle, like,
I would actually concede that stuff like The Flash or Shazam can suffer when a bunch of other Marvel shit comes out that's not entertaining because they're too similar superhero stuff. But you really think that like people being like, oh my god, Lion King, I'm getting the same thing with Little Mermaid?
I think people are more aware of the Disney remake itis.
Well, so
at this point, and I was
actually going to agree with you.
Sick of it.
My sister, I spoke to her about it because she's not watching them anymore. She used to watch them all, and I was like, why? And then she was like, they're all fucking terrible and they're kind of gross. Like she finds them.
The cultural conversation change.
I don't know why I kept this in. I'm an idiot. Okay, they just tend to agree.
Like smaller films.
I
films from abroad,
I would like that to be the
international films.
case.
Well,
I don't think
I mean-
the average person is doing it.
But
But
some
that's
people
why
might, right?
that's where I
Like-
try. Some people might, and that's where I try to help. Oh, what to watch? You just have to like.
Obviously, a cut for. There's a serious cut there because. Yeah, I think I brought it up earlier about YMS wants to not support these franchises with money or coverage or anything like this. Why EFAP has the mindset they want to fight and improve of the things they love. It's just a different in tactics for how to improve the industry. Simple as that in reality.
Have a healthy media
Hang on,
diet
again.
and be willing to try new
No
things.
problem.
not
Fine.
just
No, it's
only
all good.
watch
I know about
what
it.
is essentially just advertised to you and spoon fed to you through giant corporations. So I haven't watched this, but I found myself being interested enough to like do any kind of commentary on this guy, even though I haven't done it before, because of the fact that he showed up on Russell Brand, which sort of kind of reinforces my initial thought about him, is that he's showing up on
Yeah,
what is
this isn't a great framing from the start. Okay, why he thought he should cover him because he popped up on Russell Brand.
Yeah, it's like
I can't agree with him here. I'm trying to understand him. He's just being very naive and being like, oh, maybe I should actually look at this video as the first one and give it the political stance instead of. Yeah, there is. I can see why there's a poison in the well accusation here with this. And yeah, he does sort of give the sort of clarification with it, but does it really help? I think it shows his particular bias when it comes to focusing. When is it worth commentating on someone? God.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like, well, you could have focused on any number of the things that
But then the question is, why should he focus on that? Because it's more honest take to get his sort of reading, put it out on public. I mean, he admits he's seen a lot of video. He's seen quite a few videos. Why not cover them before this? That would have given more of a context and be like, okay, I have these ideas. I want to look into this because of Russell Brand, but for fairness, let's just take a look at some of his videos beforehand so we get it, what his videos is, and then we really get into the Russell Brand stuff. So you have a sort of comparison. But yeah, definitely very naive, maybe dishonest, but I don't like reading attention to it. I don't feel like, I think this was just a bad decision, split minute decision, as Jab pointed out. Just not thinking about the responsibility.
I agree. I mean, had YMS known he was going to be dragged onto this podcast to explain himself in the fashion that he did, you can only imagine the things he would have done differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people need to learn from their mistakes, and hopefully he learns from this session and he doesn't let that double down bullshit that tends to happen in people of all different political divide. Just be like, yeah, I'll just continue on, not take any of this in consideration.
Yeah, you have to have situational awareness about your perspectives, your opinions, and stuff. Yeah.
See, what I really judge people for is after they get the criticism, if they continue to do the same exact thing. Even, believe it or not, Hassan has gotten better. Good enough for a lot of people.
I don't believe it.
He's gotten better. But better is a relative subjective term. And sometimes he plays it off as a meme and be like, don't clip this, and sort of the dishonest joking about it because he's doing it. I think from what I've seen, he's gotten better. Good is different than better again. Okay. I'm not
I'll know Hassan's changed whenever he can pause a video, whenever he walks away from his chair.
Yeah, he hasn't changed that much, and he at least convinces his audience through various means that he's better. So it's more about the optics that maybe why I think he's slightly better. But then they tackle him on his fake news stuff. But let's not get into that. So many problems with Hassan.
Is really a political anti-vax conspiracy grifting platform, and he's
Yeah.
showing up at conspiracy anti-vax content like weird.
That.
Mhm.
This is weird.
And he keeps
but,
repeating it.
If Russell Brand reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about movies," would you go on and talk to him about movies?
I'm not sure. Probably.
Probably.
I'm not
Alright.
sure. Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, the people keep saying, "Oh, he's a hypocrite. He would go on," but we already discussed this issue that he probably would react differently than Critical Drinker if he went
Yeah,
on.
it's like if I got invited on to some large platform that
Be
shared a
careful if you get
different sort
invited
of-
on EFAP ever.
Yeah,
It didn't work out well for Doomer Media, but you're not Doomer Media. Also,
Yeah. I'll be careful. Just
No hot
as a
takes.
matter, just as a
Good
matter of
blame.
fact. Yeah, it's like exactly. It's like you should be careful.
yeah, you should have
all the
known that
same.
they would jump on him.
Because you end up with a very large audience, and it's like, well, yeah, all of the majority, perhaps, if you're like YMS going on to Russell Brand, they aren't going to share your same beliefs, right? So yeah, it's like you have to be really careful about that. But at the same time, holy shit, so worth doing.
Yeah.
So worth doing.
I think from what I've seen of that Russell Brand episode, which might be biased a little bit, he should have made sure to keep a more. I mean, it wasn't Russell Brand didn't even really get heavily into the politics, and they had to clarify some things for YMS because it wasn't really included in this for him. Again, his "What Is Woke" video is probably not the greatest video, but it's pretty damn good at explaining it. Okay. If you've seen that from Critical Drinker, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I don't think think it's his responsibility to understand the sort of core of what woke is just from his personal perspective. It's explained rather well in that video.
Yeah, it's
And
more
sets
like
him up.
whenever I say woke, here's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, there's always nitpicks you can do, but overall that video was really good, and I think that was a really good stance. I think it's Barbie sort of conspiracy brain thing. I think everyone went crazy, so I don't blame anyone for that.
My favorite video my favorite video by Critical Drinker is "Why the Past Matters." Have you ever seen it?
Probably. I mean,
It's a great video.
I think he is a good content creator. There's definitely a lot of holes in his content style, as they bring up bite-sized, very accessible things, and there's a lot of issues with reading into it. As I said, with the message, it's just so vague. People can sort of transpose whatever idea they have. Most people put it the wokeness and that bullshit, but there's going to be variations of that, which I could have an issue with if I was being hypercritical, but I'd rather not be hypercritical of someone who creates these little 10-minute videos, but then does a podcast to sort of fully flesh out. I wouldn't criticize his videos if I really wanted to go after Critical Drinker seriously. I would go after his particular podcast. Okay. That's how I would critique him.
If I had a channel with just real what if thing. If I had a channel with 1 million subscribers, and then I see someone who shares an opposite political bias of me, but perhaps they're still willing to talk. They're the type of thing. It's like their love of the art, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where your love for the game overcomes your desire to pick a team, right? Like it's like, well, if I see an individual who has a great deal of love for the game, still, I want to talk to that person. It's like I want to understand that person. It's like I want to communicate, because and it's fair to say they'd probably want to communicate with me too, because I have 1 million subscribers, they have 2 million subscribers. It's nothing but beneficial from both sides. That's what I would do if I
I absolutely agree with that. The hesitance just to the lazy ethic of, oh, let me just cover this video because it caught my interest, not thinking about the sort of ecosystem and frankly the fairness that even if he thought he was being transparent about his beliefs, it's still, if he have that naive view of the critical drinker, and maybe even, and I will even agree, his sort of transparency is much more illuminating and good for this comparison to other hit pieces from like Pillar of Garbage. Even covered a little bit of got into Gray's little coverage of, if you know about the Phantom Initiative at all. I did a little bit of that coverage. They didn't focus too much on critical drinker, but what they did do, like Turf Nation, I covered his one video, which was predicated on Pillar of Garbage, and it was all around garbage that I disagreed with. Yeah, but
I've never
as
watched
big
his videos.
yeah, it's probably not worth doing. The perils of going through different content creators and try to get the perspective. But yeah, from the sort of what going off of what you're saying, yes, if I was someone like YMS, I wouldn't go willy-nilly. I would at least try to communicate with Critical Drinker and be like, can we set up a time to chat? Maybe you could come on my stream, or maybe I can come on to your open bar. I have some criticism. I have some concerns about this that I would rather you be in here for.
Yeah,
this is why I've been.
But that's the thing, right? It's like okay, I want to put my political bias up front first because that is important to having like a meaningful conversation. The way to do that isn't in saying, well, here, I'm going to watch this interview with this person who shares the same political bias as this individual. It's like, no, it's like, I'm going
he
to
does
talk
sort
to
of try to he does try to do some comparisons that I don't think they're the same, but a lot of people are going to read that he's just giving himself sort of plausible deniability. He's trying to hint, you know. But yeah, he thinks he covered it properly, and I can understand why other people wouldn't think that sort of his transparency is enough to compensate for all the other crap he did. You understand that, right? That from his perspective, that YMS think he gave it the proper context to be fair on the critical drinker. Why he definitely, if you took out that context, it would definitely not be fair.
I think given the things that have appeared to him at this point in the stream, he hopes he's given enough context to not appear biased. I think that given none of the context of the things that have happened up until now, yeah, I think genuinely 100% he would feel like he has been unbiased. But I feel like now that more information, like I have a belief, and it's that the good people will do the best things possible if they have the best information possible. Okay. Right. And so like, I feel like with YMS, he did not have this information until he was on this stream. And now he has this information and he's trying to deal with it in real time.
He didn't even know YMS was podcast mates with Mauler. Extremely ignorant of the YouTube ecosystem. I don't know if he's stupid, ignorant, or just biased. And I can understand his reading. He's clearly annoys him because he definitely does try to keep his politics out of his reviews.
Absolutely.
Or should I say he any bias he thinks will actually affect his reviews, he'll lay it out and sort of clarify throughout the video that this could be his bias, why he believes this, but it's still, I can understand why people wouldn't eat. Just like I don't think people should put their standards on YMS necessarily, I don't think YMS is necessarily fair to put his standards on other people also.
I could have guessed YMS's political biases before this controversy,
Even
But
if you never heard
but
anything about YMS,
even had I not watched it, so like I love his Lion. Man, I've fallen asleep to his Lion King review so many nights. Like I love his review of the Lion King. It's so good, and I cannot wait for part 2. Right, but it's like his political biases, based on the things he says, I can kind of guess where he falls. But though I can sort of guess where he falls, if I were to have never seen his takes on the critical drinker, I wouldn't care. It doesn't bother me. It's a non-starter. It's a non-event.
yeah,
But
he's not taking his responsibility as a content creator very seriously. I will agree with that. He's treating it too lightly. And for him to sort of judge Critical Drinkers Association definitely comes off as a little bit hypocritical.
Yeah,
just
like
saying
as
with
if we
that.
couldn't guess your political bias based on the things that he does, right? It's like, yeah, you can guess Critical Drinker's political bias based on the type of coverage that he does. It's like, you can kind of say the same thing in reverse. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah. Oh.
His interviews are very very non-confrontational and leading. He kind of like, we'll see as it goes along.
So
I'm actually
you think
shocked that he asked some genuine questions at certain points, but
Okay.
all right.
there's like a part of him that comes through at points.
Because I was going to say
Alright,
that if Russell
alright.
Brand invited me, I would totally go on. But if he was to be like,
Yeah,
"Did you
absolutely.
know that the Earth is flat?" I'd be
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck are you talking about, mate?"
My
I'd say
yeah,
criticism.
This sort of reinforces that YMS would actually give him pushback. So would Mauler. Okay, it's just the fact that Critical Drinker doesn't seem to do it very much, but that suits the Critical Drinker. Critical Drinker isn't very confrontational, even in his open bar. I think he sometimes just nods and agrees with people, like with the example that I poisoned the well with both Gary and not Gary, Heels versus Babyface and Enamon, the king of woke clickbait, going on about pandering. I just found that so funny that no one's like, dude, you clickbait woke and played that tune so bad. You should not be talking about pandering. I even respect Az enough to know that I don't think he panders. Okay, but Inimon, that one reviewer, I just found that hypocritical. But I'm poisoning the well against Critical Drinker. Sorry, man. I know I brought you on to stand for Critical Drinker here, and I'm just shitting all over your efforts. I'm not even going to let you speak. I'm moving on. Ha ha ha.
Disgusting.
I want to make clear.
I know.
It's not a criticism of the Critical Drinker to have accepted going on to Russell Brand's show. I was mentioning that it's a reflection of the audience crossover that he would be invited there in the first place, right? It's a observation of the.
I mean, I think this is fair enough, given everything I know about Russell Brand. But I actually know more about this, and I think Mauler, Steelman, in this talk is sort of talking out of his ass.
The sort of audience, the same thing I was talking about earlier.
Well, so obviously the only problem would be, because I'm not familiar, does Russell ever have people on that he doesn't necessarily align with?
And you
Well,
would
at
say
least
no.
he sort of, at least he puts it on.
I mean, I would have to watch every single Russell Brand video, but like,
I just
No, you
I don't
don't.
mean in that sense. I just mean, like, doesn't he have
You would
people
need a
that,
good
theoretically
sample.
speaking, he would have a bit of a confrontation?
Would you
with,
say
like,
no?
some of the other
He
ideas
does
he's
not
got?
that's
have
not my
people on?
understanding. My understanding is
That he
No,
disagrees
I
with?
don't think he does. I've seen a lot of Russell Brand content. I don't think he gets much pushback. There's some minor.
I don't
areas
watch
of-
a lot of Russell Brand, so you would know.
I
better than
actually
would.
used to try to get into Russell Brand before he really started going really hardcore conspiracy theory.
Mhm.
Okay,
I watched
and
him
I'm
while he
like-
was still on YouTube.
like
Occasionally,
this, like sometimes with Brett Weinstein, I was liking him, and I did agree with his initial criticisms of the vaccine when it wasn't cool to do that. But he just went so far over that. I'm just like, okay, is this just gonna? I understand why you're doing this. I'm
Yeah.
just like,
It's like,
I
this is
think
going to
there's-
become your whole identity, and that's okay. I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain point where it's just overkill. And I understand with some of these political issues you feel strongly about, especially with the vaccine, why you would keep bringing up over and over again because there are issues with that. But as an audience member, I just get fatigued. You get fatigue, okay? And some people have more tolerance for something getting repeated. I have very little tolerance. This is why I can opt out and find other people's content. Why other people probably have a better attention span than me for some of this content.
No, I agree. I'm
Mostly
not
just create.
a fan of I'm not a fan of being a fan of any particular like type of set of content. I change camps pretty easily.
Yeah, and I don't want to judge people who can't abandon these failing fandoms too much. But I do sympathize for them. But I think it would be better to move on personally.
Creating like a space for he knows what his audience wants to hear, and he kind of just facilitates that with the types of conversations that he has.
In case you didn't know, Drinker himself, he's been interviewed now like on countless channels. I think he accepts a lot of invitations from anything from like 0 subs to people like Russell Brand. I think that if
have you ever tried to get Critical Drinker or Mauler onto your show?
Oh, I tried. Actually, I should talk to CT about talking to Mauler. I tried messaging him, but of course, I'm like, of course, this wouldn't work. Maybe I should talk to CT about talking to Mauler. Okay,
I sent Mauler a message a long time ago and never got a response. But I tried messaging him recently, and he said that there was a thing on his Discord that said like he doesn't even take messages from people who aren't on his friends list anymore. So kind of
understandable. I mean, I actually know someone who probably could put me into contact with Mauler, but I don't know if I want to go that route. I
would be fascinated to have a conversation with Mauler.
Well, I would actually try to get to the gist of all the nonsense with the Southpaw bullshit. I don't even think he would probably want to discuss that, and I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like I've always been really fascinated. Like I would be really curious to have like just a one-on-one discussion. And yeah, like Critical Drinker too. Like yeah, same sort of thing. I've interviewed a couple of larger YouTube creators, and yeah, I would be really interested to ask them the same sort of questions. Yeah.
Clip this for CT. I'm going to do a play off of Adam and Stitch thing. I'm probably going to clip this and send it to her. Clip it for CT and not clip it CT. Maybe she'll hear our pleas. Okay. If I clip this, but let's not get too focused. I am curious who you interviewed. I looked through your channel, a lot of E-Flap clips. I didn't see any interviews. Did you do it on your main channel or?
So there's a whole chapter of my channel that I've deleted at this point, but I used to be very heavily involved in the politics scene, and I'm still pretty well ensconced in some political discords where certain conversations are had. And yeah, I had an interview once with JF.
JF. Okay.
And I had an interview with Mr. Medicare.
Oh, awesome.
And
I mean, I have interesting feelings about Mr. Medicare. I think he's overall positive, but a bit of a schizo, but entertaining schizo at least. One of the better ones out of that. But let me not say too much about the rest of that. As you saw,
I'm glad he's not dead yet. He had a stream the other day.
Yeah, I saw that. I tuned in for a bit. It bored me. I mean, he's very entertaining. He can make a lot of things entertaining, but what he was going into just didn't interest me. But it was nice to see that he's alive.
Yeah, exactly. All I care about is that he's alive. Yeah.
If, let's say, AOC was to ask him for an interview, I think he'd accept.
Russell Brand? Or sorry, Critical Drinker?
Yeah, Critical Drinker.
Yeah, I think this is just pure bullshit, pure steel man. And I think this is sort of bullshit, as you sort of brought up, trying to communicate with them. I don't know. Maybe Critical Drinker. What would Critical Drinker talk to? Okay, let's not dwell on this issue. I might be able to push this a little bit longer. I'm sorry. I want to cover at least one last thing. Let's get past this point.
Obviously, again, it's not a phenomenon that we all go through. Like if we're interacting with a certain type of person and you know that that person wants to hear like a certain type of thing, I think that most people kind of gravitate towards, you know, like,
He's talking about code switching, but it takes so long to explain. Just, I think you brought it up earlier.
Code switching?
About it's considered code switching. Like if the best example is if you have like black friends, let's say you're a white guy, you have black friends, you sort of use the more slang, and you might even say the N word, but you have the N pass because you're
There
black.
ain't no fucking way I'm saying the N word around my black friends.
Well, if you have the N pass and you've hung out with them, but then you go see your very white wasp family, then you
well, it's like I could
hoity-toity.
I could use soft A around my black friends. There ain't no
That's
way
what
I'm
I'm
using
saying.
hard R around my black friends.
I wasn't implying the hard R, okay? I'm not ER, sheesh. But yeah, the codes, it's a
He's
very
funny as
extreme
fuck.
code switching. But yeah, that's what it's considered, code switching. You sort of change how you deal with different people. And I think YMS is very naive and really just goes on for way too long and could really simplify things. But I also go on my occasional rants, but
I guess like changing their phrasing or even sort of
Yeah, I
like
think you're right.
nudging into things that they want to hear. And I feel like there's moments in this interview where Critical Drinker does that, maybe not consciously, where, you know, I think he understands like
So yeah.
By comparison,
where, you know, I think he understands like being on the
my
Russell Brand
laziness is
program
catching up with
and
me.
him having those guests. I think that, you know, kind of being like, oh, I have to live up to that. That is like kind of like a, you know, maybe not direct, but
I would have cut out a
mild
lot
phrasing
of
of
that.
those.
He's talking about Ron
I think he may have ended up saying the same
DeSantis,
thing,
Tucker
that even if, like-
Carlson.
Yeah, he does bring up the Ron DeSantis, and I think freaking Mauler, I don't know if that's proper. I think he steelmans that a little bit too hard, okay, to try to make a Critical Drinker. That one I can actually get behind a little more. There's a little bit more leeway that I can't say for sure about between Ron DeSantis and the other political figure that showed
Tucker
up on
Carlson?
Russell Brand. Tucker Carlson. Okay.
I don't know if that's yeah.
I
think
just
that's what it was.
frankly think that's a little bit of cope from Mauler there. Okay. A little bit of strong steel man in win, but it's not as blatant as saying Critical Drinker would go on a lot of smaller streams and stuff. That sounds like even more hope there. But that's my personal opinion on that. Maybe Critical Drinker would go on, you know, not my channel, but maybe someone who had like 1,000, 10,000 subs. I guess that would be considered small for a Critical Drinker, at least, right? The definition of what's small is still the AOC.
I think Mahler would go into something where I don't know if you've ever taken an economics course, but it's like you know, you are at your equilibrium whenever your benefit is equal to your cost.
Okay. Cost benefit analysis, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like, you know, if you're coming into a cordial stream where the people there are on average genuinely cordial, you're going to be more inclined to probably go into that. Whereas if it's a lion's den for a particular type of political bias, you're going to stay the fuck away from it.
Yeah. Like the AOC, I would want to know why she wanted to interview me. Was it a got you piece? There's so many stories about journalists getting people into these and deceptively editing. Like, who was that? What's the famous example? The famous example was some Comedy Central guy, and someone recorded it and proved this one Comedy Central hack completely edited up his sort of interview to make him seem much more racist than he really was. But yeah, you have to be wary when you go into your enemy's camp. You need to be careful. But different people have different stripes. I like conflict sometimes. I would rather be civil and try to talk to people, but anyone who actually knows me. I do not shy away from actual debate and a lot of aggressive actions if I feel it's needed. I would rather be civil and try to come to an understanding, but if you want to have some blood sports, yeah, let's go. A little bit of gamer shit talking. Down for that. But not
A
everyone.
little bit of banter.
And also, I'm very small. I don't have much to lose by going off a little bit. It might come back to hit me later, but hindsight's 2020. But there is a lot of factors in the sort of political cost benefit analysis of content creation, especially at Critical Drinker and Mauler's level. It doesn't seem like YMS really is very cognizant of these concepts, though.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be as prone to blood sports as the other two.
Yeah, he came in here because he thought it was just going to be a chilled discussion, and I think he was really shocked by this conversation. Like they were,
I agree.
like a debate.
It's like he was on his heels pretty much. This was 7, dude. I told like you know this, like you took my video. It's like fucking. I edited this whole fucking thing 7 hours, like of pretty much continuous topic lock. Like there's no deviation onto other things.
Yeah, like they normally do.
Yeah, over 7 hours. That's insane. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, for YMS, I mean, yes, Mauler definitely. It definitely seems like Fringy and Rags are sidelining, but that's the fair way to do it. They probably had a talk beforehand. Like, guys, keep it down. You can bring up a few questions, but let me talk to YMS on this mainly, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Russell had said I had Trump on previously and I'm Biden on next week. He would be like, holy fuck, I've got a lot to live up to because that's huge.
Yeah, it's because they're big names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the impression I
That makes
get.
sense.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Fringy.
Not
a big fan. I actually like Rags more, but he's an asshole. You have to acknowledge, treat Rags like the asshole he is to deal with him. I could actually...
I like Rags. I don't know Fringies and Rags content separately. Honestly,
yeah, I know about Rags back from the day. I don't like his content, but I think he'd get more annoyed with me than I would get with him because I can deal with some serious stupidity and some serious conflict. Yeah,
he's definitely the comedy relief. But by and large, like, I mean, they're all kind of comedy relief, but Rags especially is sort of the comedy relief.
Yeah, taking him too seriously is always a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, some people get on Rags's case about that, and I'm like, dude, he's an asshole. You're trying to shame him, asshole for being an asshole. Good luck with that. He doesn't care.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, that is sort of him. Yeah, and there's nothing. I think it's actually good. I probably wouldn't. I think I have actually tried to watch one of Rags' videos just solo, and I lost interest after like 10-15 minutes because it didn't really feel right. It's almost like he fits best as a character in a broader show in my mind. But
yeah, it's also interesting. Rags.
I think so, yeah.
By comparison, Drinker is not as well known as Tucker.
He's a
Thompson.
YouTube film reviewer. So
Yeah, he does not strike me as a Ron DeSantis fan.
Here's a question.
No, I'm actually sure that most anti-woke people are fans of Ron DeSantis just because of his anti-woke stance. A lot of people respected that. So saying that is a little weird.
Well, okay, yeah, I agree on the level of like general political bias, but then
he would probably just respect him for his anti-woke stances, probably not actually deeply respect him as a political figure. Let me clarify that.
Well, he might just whenever he's saying like Ron DeSantis as like something that he has to live up to, and I feel like he's kind of talking like more entertainment wise, right?
Ron DeSantis, he's not really that entertaining. I think it's just his anti-woke stances are pretty good. He's actually pretty boring if you get into him. Someone like Dan Crenshaw, who, guy with
Yeah.
the eye patch. That
Yeah,
guy's somewhat
Solid Snake.
entertaining in interviews, but Ron DeSantis, I haven't seen him really being praised for entertaining. Trump, no matter what you think about him, is an entertaining man. Okay.
Yeah.
Biden's sort of a flake. I would not want to. I mean, I would have a conversation with Biden. I have no bias, like, oh, Biden's evil, dark Brandon. He's the enemy. No, he's just a stupid old man, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right. So, but do you feel like whenever we're talking about Ron DeSantis here, do you feel like, I don't know, it's hard for me to imagine because Drinker lives, he doesn't live in the U.S., right?
Yeah, but a lot of the culture wars is really focused, and a lot of critical drinkers focused on Hollywood. So that sort of gets filtered down. As I said, I don't think he's a diehard fan of someone like Ron DeSantis. He probably just heard Ron DeSantis took in measures against wokeness and be like, okay, I can respect that, man. Okay.
Yeah,
That's my feeling on it. And personally, of course, I would think my sort of perspective on it would be better than people trying to defend critical drinker from trying to be lumped into the camp. I understand why they're doing this, but I disagree with their reading on it.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah. No, I'm Vincent. I agree.
You agree. Don't pull a Dave Rubin, okay?
Yeah.
Rather
No,
people
I do.
disagree with me. It's more fun that way.
No,
Like
it's
people
fair.
want.
Like I think it's not so much like, do I think he supports Ron DeSantis? It's like, okay, can I imagine he names any negatives about Ron DeSantis? It's like, I can't imagine Critical Drinker naming any negatives about Ron DeSantis. So yeah, that's fair. What you're saying is fair.
Okay.
Since we're clarifying that, is there an issue if he did idolize Tucker Carlson and Ron DeSantis?
It wouldn't necessarily be an issue in and of itself. It would be an issue if it were misrepresentative of how he has stated otherwise. Like I said, if he may, I don't actually.
Oh, this is some serious lawyering. I mean, I respect Mauler's game here, but this is some serious lawyer, and it's just funny to me. Sorry, you probably have no comment on that, do you?
No, go ahead.
No, but my impression from this is that he's just saying they're big figures, and that I think you misunderstood. That's all.
Okay.
As for like the nature of someone's idolization of any particular person could be good or bad or neutral. It just depends on what they say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So isn't there equal reason in a cynical sense that Russell Brand would bring on big figures that are willing to come on?
Yeah, but if they can't have a conversation about the same like kind of culture war stuff that he regularly talks about, then there's really no point.
If I'm remembering this right, I think I agree mainly with YMS here throughout.
Yep.
Okay, he brings up a lot of points, and yeah, it's good that Mauler is trying to steel man the other side's perspective to sort of challenge YMS on this. Totally, completely fair. I'm pretty sure the audience didn't really like this, that Mauler seems to be losing. But really, I really think there's a good majority. Let's hope it isn't as much of a majority as some people make it out to be, the sort of toxic people in the EFAP community who likes that sort of debate, own someone instead of try to come to an understanding and,
Okay. So, Critical Drinker could have, let's say, yeah, he has a positive view of Ron DeSantis. How relevant is that to his opinions on videos?
It shouldn't actually be relevant at all. I do agree.
Right. Yeah, it's
I do agree with that general sentiment that
I feel like if the whole thing wasn't so politically slanted, perhaps the point that he likes Ron DeSantis wouldn't even matter.
Yeah, I agree. It's just it shouldn't be an actual issue. But do you know what's going on with Wendigo?
Wendigoon? No, I haven't heard. I've heard kind of like,
because he's a Christian and a gun owner. People are trying to make him like and he follows Kyle Rittenhouse. People are trying to make him out to be a Nazi, and I'm like, oh. Why is anyone even talking about that? Of course, the fucking crazy leftists think that they have such a reductionist view. Why even
I'm
go
a
with
Christian and a gun owner, but I don't. I thought the Kyle
Oh,
Rittenhouse
watch
trial
out,
was
watch out.
entertaining.
I'm
but
gonna have
yeah.
to edit that out for your own safety, man.
Oh
Twitter's
no,
gonna
yeah,
go-
please, yeah, please
Sorry.
keep an umbrella. No, it's okay. I got something here for safety. We're fine.
Respect a man who's willing to stand his ground. Just be careful in the political atmosphere. But yeah, you can see guilt by association. I don't even think that's what YMS is trying to do by sort of pointing out that critical drinker seems impressed to be between them. It shouldn't actually matter. And maybe YMS is reading a little bit too much into it.
Yeah.
It
Like
shouldn't be
I feel like just by the result that we're able to read so much into it, it's like, oof. It's like, well, it's not even the political bias isn't even so much dedicated to the fact that we can put so much into this particular decision. The political bias actually aims more into why we're even having this A or B decision in the first place. Right? The political bias, I feel like YMS's political bias in this whole thing is the reason that brings us all here. Because had we just talked about critical drinkers videos, perhaps we would have never even brought up political bias. But because we're on Russell Brand's show, which anti-vax, all that shit, it has all of that built into it. Well, then it's like, well, we're more inclined to talk about the political stuff than probably anything else.
Yeah, this is actually a weird paradox if you think about it. It seems like YMS criticism is that Critical Drinker, being such a popular YouTuber reviewer on it, sort of with his right-wing bias, it could be a bad thing in reality, okay? That he has this right-wing bias. But by pointing that out, he shows his left-wing bias. I mean, and yeah, he tries to use this as a chance to sort of show he agrees with him, but he generally he's going for that hypocritical argument that the critical drinker wants to keep wokeness out, and he finds that a bit hypocritical of him to talk about this when his own personal bias he sees. I think it comes down to Critical Drinker talks way more about the culture war than YMS. YMS tries to keep the culture war out of his reviews. So he's thinking the Critical Drinker criticizing woke Disney for having political leanings when Critical Drinkers having it. But YMS is not aware that he's showing his own general bias, his positions that if you say you don't want wokeness in movies and entertainment, it's a weird Ouroboros thing. Snake eating its own tail, in my opinion. I probably did not put that out that so well.
I know what you mean. Yeah, symbolism for anxiety. Yeah,
it's just a weird sort of paradoxical or oxymoronic sort of loop that's going on here. And just occurred to me. That's why you had this whole little. Anything to say over that or move on?
No, let's carry on. I got probably about another 20, 30 minutes in me.
Yeah,
he doesn't really. I don't know. I don't know if he has many conversations that aren't kind of explicitly.
Yeah, I think I covered this well enough. There is one topic before I end the stream I do want to go with that I agree very heavily with YMS on. Maybe we don't even need the stream for this, the video. A balanced media diet. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, it is relevant to have a balanced media diet. However, I do not believe you need a balanced. I feel like the balanced media diet argument used in this way is more of a shield from the idea that we might be criticizing something that's relevant, right? Like I feel like it's like what we're saying, so here's the best movies in society. We have Star Wars, and we have Marvel, and well, all of these things are tainted in their own way, and it's like they're messed up. There's something wrong about it. And well, someone who's on YMS's camp would say, well, yeah, you're arguing about this one silly thing that it's like, well, sure, the majority of people care about it, but at the same time, like, look at all these other things. If you just look in your periphery, there's all of these other movies being made all of the time, and they're very relevant and very important. And yeah, that is true, but I feel like I feel like that point isn't attached to the original point, which is that we should care about why these great things that we once cared about have gone south. So it's a relevant point on one level, which is, well, it's not all bad. Look at this. But on another level, where things are bad, it's more of an opiate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pretty well explained. My thoughts on the balance. I agree with YMS, and I agree with Jab that it really does sound pretentious, and the fact he keeps on harping on that, bringing up, you don't even need a film festival for this. Because my perspective on a balanced media diet is different mediums. Like, it's notorious that Rags hates animated anime and shit like that, but he's not to be taken seriously. And again, I brought up the whole Mauler versus Critical Devil, and everyone criticizing him over that sort of weird debate with Literature Devil, who hadn't watched, he wasn't properly prepared for the debate, so he just conceded to Mauler. And it's fine to have your personal wheelhouse, but sometimes it doesn't really apply to EFAP generally. I think yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender is the most standout. I think there's a few other things where they tread into territory where they're not really equipped because they don't have a really balanced perspective on medium as a whole, or even film studies. Like the thing you said about Marvel and Star Wars being some of the greatest franchises, maybe in science fiction, and I can respect that. But I'm big into science fiction books also, and cartoons and anime. My diet is way more vast. I stay away from American comic books. That's one territory that I just like. There's enough people talking about it. I don't need to learn about it. I don't need to comment at all. But yes, I know I've taken classes on creative writing, film study courses, acting courses, playwright courses. I've gotten a very balanced diet in my education and in my experiences. And when you look at some of these guys just trying to tread like on Barbie, it just baffled me. So many people felt they had to comment on it, not be able to understand. And I'm very I try to be very understanding of why Barbie's throwing everyone off with what they call deceptive marketing, and why they're not understanding the format of it. There's also other things that I severely disagree with, that I think if they were more, oh, this is going to sound pretentious, more educated, had a more balanced media diet, not in quite the same way as YMS is putting it out, just more in education. You don't need to go to these little film festivals, hoity-toity film festivals, to have a balanced diet. But going into the nitty-gritty of that, I think should be important to media critics. But as Mauler put out, a lot of media critics sort of fall into this 90% range of the same recycled topics overall. Because if you're not doing certain videos on certain movies or mediums, you're not going to get the views. And a lot of people do this as a business. So I understand from a practical perspective why people specialize in these things in the culture war.
Sure, yeah, there is a practical side of it, but at the same time, like if I'm to think about it objectively, I can't think of a story like a meta narrative more relevant to me than Star Wars.
Yeah, I understand. A lot of people
Right, like,
attach
this
their
is like
childhood, and it's like there's some people who criticize Star Wars for being a knockoff of Dune. Okay.
yeah, sure, absolutely. I've seen the Dune movie. I think it's really good. I've actually read the first book. It's extremely good.
You
It's a
got through
really
that book? Oh, I had
yeah,
trouble.
it's a
Maybe I was too
fucking
young.
nightmare. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, but you can get through it, and yeah, it's a really well threshed out like universe and everything. But as far as the thing that I watched like on the screen, like whenever I'd go to the library every week and we would rent something, it's like it was always one of the three of the original Star Wars trilogy, right? And I remember watching that shit over and over again. And whenever I think of like a meta narrative that is applicable, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure I know for a fact there's all of these other good things made by independent like artists, directors that are extremely good.
And there's also other mediums that outside of just that anime.
But
There's some subjective people who can't really get into anime because they can't just see it as anything in drawings, books, as you brought up. Yes.
But it does not change the degree to which Star Wars has affected me, and the degree to which I hate what's happened to it, and I want to see better out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see Star Wars rise from the ashes. Okay.
Yeah,
and
Well, and that's the thing, right?
people praising it like the littlest thing. Yeah, it definitely would annoy me if I wanted to get better, and I'm seeing slop being. But I think there's a certain amount of bias that there is in media criticism, at least on YouTube, probably on social media in general. I think just is overblown, overproportionate, and creates a lot of division within fandoms and culture in general, just like the fighting between the left and right. These dynamics, and not enough people, because there's not enough incentive to actually engage with the middle area, which I will defend Critical Drinker. I don't think he's perfect at getting into that nuanced areas, but at least he makes the attempt at doing that. And I believe in. Go on.
I was curious. I was curious. Like, whenever you hear the word judgmental, is there a positive or a negative connotation to it?
Most people will actually have a negative connotation. I don't.
I mean, like you. Like for you.
Me personally.
You personally.
No, I don't actually give it any particular bias. You can have judgmental, can be many different things, but I would rather flesh things out. I'd rather understand things from the ground up.
Judgmental is to thresh things out, right?
Judgmental is sort of like you judge something based on characteristics. Like sometimes they can be superficial, sometimes they can be other elements, but you're usually not taking the medium as a whole, not analyzing it as a totality. Because frankly, on the baseline, for a general, I'm going to keep on using this line, the George Carlin joke. Imagine, think about how smart the average person you know is, and realize half the world is dumber than that. You people, the more popular you have to be, like why all these companies are sort of trying to broaden out, appeal to the greatest possible population they can, is to make the most money. But my personal perspective is that media made for everyone isn't made for anyone. And sure, I have my criticisms of these big corporate companies and how they completely sort of negate the target audience. And I'm really askance that geek culture is getting called toxic and racist and all these little issues here because geeks embraced for the longest time. Geek culture has been the most accepted. Star Wars, no, it's not Star Wars. Star Trek had the first interracial kiss. Freaking Night of the Living Dead gave a black man the lead, not based on the fact he was black. He was the best actor for that. These sort of niche geek culture things sort of cracked open the sort of what these progressives call, and now they go back and call everything pragmatic. Yeah, I have emotional reaction to that. I don't think I should bring sort of my emotional baggage, my feelings into these mediums where I feel like, you understand, I don't want to bring that baggage in. I would rather try to understand it as a core, try to identify where I think the writing, what elements are good and what elements need to be thrown out. Being fair, I think, is the best way to actually critique things. And you can, as YMS said, you can put your personal bias out there and personally say, maybe my personal bias is coloring me on this particular issue here. Most honest way to deal with something like that. But ultimately, the system we have does not prioritize having a nuanced totality looking at these type of mediums. It prioritizes and puts up the most simplest, easiest to understand videos, which Critical Drinker definitely his sort of culture war leaning with very particular elements. Like I read, to understand Critical Drinker's writing process more, I actually read and reviewed his Dark Harvest book. It almost got no views. I think it was rather solid, a little bit too predictable in my opinion, a little cliche. I deducted a few points for some things, but overall it was an enjoyable read and worth, actually Dark Harvest is worth a little bit samey, you know. I feel a little bit of Resident Evil inspired it, a little bit of his action series because this is why I didn't actually go over his action series because I know my own bias against action series. Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm just curious. Like, whenever we talk about like, your like what you're looking for whenever we're talking about critiquing this like new generation of particularly Star Wars. I'm assuming there's something in Ashoka that wasn't there in Book of Boba Fett or Kenobi for you. Like, I'm assuming there's something in Ashoka particularly that stood out to you. Am I wrong?
Yes, I could see the some attempts. I could see some attempts to try to do better, and I will try to at least respect the fact you're trying to do better, even if the end result is a horrible mess. Yeah, it's a step back from Andor, but it was almost better than almost even the first, in my personal opinion, better than the first season of Mandalorian. That might be a hot take. The totality of that series, well, at least should I say the first half, they were pretty evenly matched. I think Ahsoka, I don't know which one went off the rails. It's very comparable to the first season of The Mandalorian. And I'm not as harsh on Mandalorian as probably some people in the EFAP circles, but I do respect that what they were trying to do with it, and it went off the rails. Same thing with Ahsoka. I could respect what they were doing, but it went off the rails again. And I think, no, that's all I really have to say.
Well, so you're saying like it went off the rails. Like, yeah, I totally agree. It did go off the rails, but like, it should be criticized for going off the rails, right?
No, yeah, it should be criticized. But if you want to, you should, if you really want to talk about and try to convince people, my criticism against Mauler was just, if you want to try to convince the general market that the methodology he used to talk about it will not appeal to people outside of his audience. So maybe that wasn't his aim. It just seems like something I thought would actually be good for him to do, because he does it. He has mixed results. He generally does it so well.
Do you
Okay,
think that
yeah, I
there's
can use
someone
that
who
example. Mauler's videos are typically so rock solid, and even if I disagree with a few points here and there, ultimately I can agree with his overall point. And let's consider most of his videos is like the OT Star Wars. You know, it's good, even great to a certain extent. It has the little flaws that you can nitpick at. And, you know, his recent content has been a little bit decline, in my opinion. And, but it's more Andor level compared to the OT, something like that. And that one video, Star Wars Can't Grow Up, that's very comparable in my mind if we apply the Star Wars franchise to Mauler's content in particular. It's comparable. There were some elements that I could take away from Star Wars Can't Grow Up that I actually liked and very agreed with. But there was a lot of elements I think just disrupted it. Much like there was many elements in Ahsoka that really just fucked up the story. Is that an interesting sort of comparison between the two, you think? Or if even fair? I'm not going to assume all my criticism or thoughts are fair. Hey, but you brought up the Ahsoka. You're a bot.
No, I mean, it's like I would say like your thoughts are fair. It's like, you know, you can't fault someone for having an opinion on something ultimately, right?
Yeah, I'm welcome pushback and criticism and debate and discussion. I think that's the best way to go about it. It can be exhausting and you might not have time for it, or you might not think it's worth fighting with some rando on the internet. But you got to pick and choose your battles. I just am trying to improve discourse within.
If I'm going to have a discussion, a serious discussion about Star Wars with someone, I'm definitely going to do it on the internet.
Yeah, you might as well at least keep a record. Maybe
it's not really
get
something for the
some
public circle. Yeah.
Maybe you'll get some popularity out of it. Maybe you won't. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's like
it's
maybe that cute girl will finally be like, "Hey, it's like I saw you over there having that discussion about Book of Boba
on your stream. You don't already have that cute girl?
Yeah, there's one cute girl who attends my stream.
Oh, you want a Harlem. I get it. You're not satisfied with one cute girl. You want that that critical drinker clout so you can have a whole Harlem of cute girls.
And
not
they'll
like
all
other
be wearing
girls.
like rubber Twi'lek helmets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would say the short. I would go with the sort of alternative girl, but that's just my particular preference there. You know, short skirt and a long jacket, but everyone has their own preferences.
Yeah, exactly. They all have to be pro-life, you know, of course.
I want to be pro-life, but there's some pro. Let's not get into politics. Sorry.
Yeah,
and let's as I said, I wanted to cover the sort of balanced media, and you sort of got us down the Ahsoka rabbit hole, which is perfectly fine. I'm perfectly fine reiterating because some things I think it's worth talking about Ahsoka because it's definitely a very flawed thing, but it like with me and my little group of centrists, the thinkers, we had a whole arc about Barbie discussing that, and I was probably the only pro Barbie person because of my particular background in theater, the theater of absurd, and I kept trying to explain things about both cinema, acting to this group of people who are more normie EFAP fans for generally, and trying to figure out how to communicate some of these ideas in a way. I think it's worth trying to communicate with various people to understand what you need to do to communicate with different people. That's just me.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I've wasted untold amount of hours having intense arguments with people on the internet only to come to the same conclusion. Yeah.
And you are absolutely right. It's better to do a recording of it because sometimes you're like, oh shit, really wish I would have recorded that. You know, I would have asked the other party before I put it online because I think that's really interesting. Something other people might find interesting.
Oh yeah, God knows. I've had a lot of really interesting conversations over the years. Yeah.
You wish
I don't know what it is. I'm sorry.
And you wish you would have recorded so you could have put like, look at this debate or discussion we had over blah blah blah. Yeah.
It's sometimes it's like I'm in the middle of it and it's just like fuck. Like I wish I had turned OBS on and had been recording because it's like, damn, this is like a really interesting conversation. Yeah, for sure. It's like I've had those moments. Yeah.
I'm trying to do something weird. Well, I just walk it. I swear, I just keep on walking into different circumstances that actually turn out quite interesting for me. I can have fun with different circumstances, and you can meet some cool people like you, man.
Absolutely.
I wish I could pop up for your streams more often, but frankly, it's just hard sometimes to try to. I'm trying to create. I'm always like, should I be supporting these guys that I sort of like, or should I be creating content or thinking about different things or blah blah blah? But yeah, plug your stuff, man.
You're fine.
I think you got a slightly bigger channel than me, but I don't really consider numbers much of a thing. But if I blow up, maybe that.
I don't really give a shit about any of that. It's just like it's really, really fun having a conversation.
If you want to invite me on for a conversation, late night conversation on your stream, go ahead. You might not want to take the cap. You took off our debate. Was that social pressure that caused you to take it down, or did you not think it fit?
I hate the sound of my voice, and honestly, I tend to like I don't keep anything up on my channel. Like if you notice, like my live streams, I stream every night, but every day it's like I take my stream down. It's like because it's like I put it out there for the moment, and when it's on, and when it's gone, it's gone, and that I'm happiest with it that way. But you know, if other people wanted to fucking clip it or do whatever they want to do, that's fine with me too. It doesn't, but it's just that I like it that way.
Yeah, everyone has their preferences. Being aware and not being too judgmental. Yeah, you can have a little fun judgmental. Like a lot of people leave me comments like, "This is boring." I'm like, I don't care. You don't have to watch. I'm trying to create different type of content. It might not always be the most entertaining. I'll try to do my best to give it, a little bit of edge. So it might be worth watching, but who knows? You got to experiment when you're little because once this sort of shit, if you're lucky enough to get big, you sort of get into sort of a groove and sort of get fast tracked. But Slayton Starfish, and I will link his channel. He streams, but you mostly do just from what I've seen, EFAP clips, correct?
Correct. Tons of EFAP highlights. Come on there. Yeah, take a look. It's beautiful.
Yeah. The EFAP industrial complex opposed to the Hassan industrial complex.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Vincent. Thanks for having me on, man. Love you, brother.
Take care. End stream now.